No problem. Okay, so today's topic is going to be Hanukkah. Pronunciation is Hanukkah. I know, kind of a hard pronunciation for people who haven't practiced the ch sound, but that's how it is pronounced in Hebrew. So Hanukkah is it's a holiday that is as old as around, I think, 2,300 years or so. It is it's one of what a lot of Christians or people who are not familiar with Judaism think that it is one of the major holidays. It's actually one of the lower holidays of Judaism. It is the lesser holiday because from all of the condemnations of the Talmud, it is a rabbinic holiday. It is not it's not an Old Testament holiday. It's not one commanded by God. It is one created by the rabbis, which why I brought up in the Talmud right now is because, just to let you guys know, Jesus himself celebrated Hanukkah. I think it is in John where it is mentioned. So for all the hate that there is in the Talmud, it seems as though Jesus really didn't have a problem with the rabbinic law as a concept. He only had a problem with the hypocrites, and he condemned the hypocrites, which, I am certain there were at the time of Jesus. I'm certain there were certain people who would gladly sell out Judaism to the Romans, as certain people have been recorded to do so. So that is, I find no issue with calling out the hypocrites at all. But just for those who think that he was calling out all the Pharisees, well, it seems as though he was calling out a specific group of people. But by no means was he attacking the oral law as a whole, since, as you can see, he himself was celebrating the holiday of Hanukkah. Now, what is the significance of the holiday of Hanukkah? Very interesting question, because most people would assume it is, okay, the oil, the miracle that lasted 8 days, all of the oil was made profane by the idol-worshipping Greeks, the Seleucids, which another interesting thing to mention is some time ago, I mentioned that the war for civilization has always been a war between the West and the East. I'm not attacking the people who live in China in the East, or the people who live in Iran or Persia or India. I'm not attacking them individually as nations. I'm just saying the ideology between West and East has always been the struggle. This has always been the struggle, the West versus the East. And I made this comparison to the Hanukkah story, that the West is Israel and the East is the Greeks. So some wise guy entered the chat and told me, well, Greeks are more west than Israel, so my analogy doesn't really work. So I quickly opened up a map to the person. I told him, actually, we're not talking about Greece here. We're talking about the Greeks, who dominated the Persian Empire. They dominated Syria. They dominated the more eastern region, and they were called the Seleucids, after the general I think his name was Seleucid. That's what they were called. So again, as I was saying, it has always been a battle between the West and the East. The West has been Israel, then turned Rome after Christianity, since Christianity migrated to Rome. That's where the Pope lives. I mean, that's where the heart of Christianity was. So it has always been a battle between West and East. Again, and you could also see this with Sparta versus the Persians. You can see this constantly. United States versus the Soviets, United States versus the communists in China. It's always the West versus the East, ideologically speaking. Again, I want to make sure that people understand I'm not attacking individuals who live in India or individuals who live in the eastern part of the world. That is stupid. I'm talking about ideologically. It's always West versus East. And this is exactly what was happening in the time of the Second Temple, when Yehuda Maccabee, that was Matthias, or I guess you could say Matthew. I guess that would be his name in English, Matthew Maccabee, who took up the sword against the Greeks. But he didn't only take up the sword against the Greeks. He took up the sword also against the Hellenized Jews, and he slaughtered Hellenized Jews who gave into Greek culture. Now, before I continue on the bloody path of discussing the killing of Jews who are attacking their own religion, I would like first to mention the point which most people think about when they hear Hanukkah. They think of the oil, which was made tuma meaning impure or actually profane, because the hedonistic idol worshipping Seleucids knew that the Jews cannot use oil to light the menorah if it is profane, and they directly tried to make it profane. They tried to bring in a monument, not a monument, a statue of Zeus into the temple sanctuary. Which, another interesting thing for everybody to know, and this is very interesting. I don't know if you guys know this, but in Judaism, or you have a lot of Orthodox Jews, or not even Orthodox, just Jews whose name is Alexander. And Kimberly, I just want to finish this, and then we'll go to your question, or we'll go to your hand. Okay. A lot of Jews are named Alexander. Something extremely interesting, because Alexander is a Greek name, and it never makes any sense. Why would the Jews, who are anti-Greek and anti-Seleucid and anti this assimilation into Greek culture, suddenly name their kids Alexander? We have a lot of Alexanders in the Jewish nation. That doesn't really make any sense. Since when do we name our kids Alexander? Here's the interesting thing: when Alexander the Great conquered Judea and he entered the temple, the first thing he entered Jerusalem. The Jews, and headed by, I can't remember who was the grand priest, said, welcomed him immediately, because this was a new conquering empire, and the Jews really didn't have a problem with the Greeks. They welcomed him, and they gave him the tour of the temple, and they even went into further places in the temple where normally Gentiles were not allowed, because of the profane, because they did worship idols. So you're not really allowed to go too far. You're allowed into the temple, but not too far. There were certain areas where it was restricted for Gentiles, but we made an exception. The Jews made an exception. Okay, Alexander the Great, he's the king. You know what? We're gonna make an exception for him. He goes into the temple and he thinks, what? This will be a great place to put up a monument to Zeus, a shrine to Zeus. And this was a big no-no. You cannot put up an idol in the Jewish temple. So you're gonna love this. What he said, the grand priest said, no, let's not do that. Let's do something much more powerful. Instead of putting in a monument to Zeus, actually no, it was a monument to himself, because he considered himself a god. Sorry, not to Zeus, but to himself. And he said, instead of putting up a monument to yourself here, how about this? We are going to name every firstborn for 1 year. Every firstborn is going to be named Alexander after yourself. So your legacy will go down in history, because a statue could be destroyed, but a legacy of your name can never be destroyed, because there's always going to be somebody who's going to be named after you. What do you think of that? And Alexander loved the idea. So this is why in Judaism now we have Jews who are named Alexander, because of the genius of the grand priest to make sure that he does not defile the temple, but also to appease Alexander, say, listen, this is going to be your great fortune. Because you're going to comply with our laws, we are going to venerate, or we're going to give you a great honor of naming all of our firstborns after you. And this is why you have Alexander in Judaism. Okay, so go ahead, Kimberly.
I wanted to know why the oil was profane.
Yes, the oil was turned profane because they touched it. So the idol worshippers, the Seleucids, they touched the oil, and the oil needed to be pure. Not only literally virgin olive oil, but it had to be pure figuratively as well. It needed to be pure of any outside forces. And what was believed is that idol worshipping, those who worship idols or any such entity, would have a certain force or a certain power that looms over it or within it, that gets transferred to the oil if it is not protected. So this is the reason why the oil why the Seleucids, knowing this full well, started turning the oil profane, and they didn't have enough oil. So by not having enough oil, we couldn't turn on the menorah, which had to be turned on every day, but yet we couldn't do it because it has to be done a certain way. So here's what most people think, it is the mainstream idea, and I don't blame anybody for thinking it this way, that the miracle of Hanukkah is that it lasted 8 days or 8 nights or whatever. The thing is that certain say it lasted that the oil itself was reused, or some say that the fire burned for 8 days. We don't really know what the. I'm not saying, sorry, it's not that we really know. Everybody has a certain opinion of what was happening, but that is more or less generally recognized as being the miracle. Go ahead, Matt.
So can you cite the scripture in John where Jesus celebrated Hanukkah so I can look it up?
Yes, absolutely. Give me a moment. I don't have it in front of me, so I will have to look it up. Just give me a moment. Meanwhile, I'm talking, I'll look it up. So, that is what is generally recognized as being the miracle of Hanukkah. But what I believe, or this is actually a much more deeper understanding of the miracle of Hanukkah, is not that the oil lasted 8 days. That is, of course, what I would call a pure miracle, something that you can see with your own eyes, like something that it's undeniable. Like you can see the oil multiplying, or the fire burning longer than it should be. Like that doesn't happen in nature. That is unnatural. That is not supposed to happen. So that is a pure miracle. It's something that's undeniable. Even when it comes to let's say cancer, and somebody is being healed, that is not a pure miracle. We could call it a miracle. Look, he's being healed from cancer, but it's not a pure, because naturally speaking, you could survive cancer and live it through, right? It's a natural process, but this is a completely unnatural process by which the miracle occurred. So this is what I call a pure miracle. This is what most people talk about. But here's the miracle that is not a pure miracle, but it is much more, way more significant than oil lasting 8 days. The miracle is that the Jewish nation survived, because it was not supposed to happen. Antiochus, that was his name, Antiochus Epiphanes, he was the fourth, Antiochus the fourth. He wanted completely to extinguish Judaism as a whole, completely, utterly, and destroy it. His edicts were that Jews are not to circumcise, not allowed to learn the Torah, not allowed to go by the lunar month. Those are core tenets of the Jewish faith, and he did not want Jews to be able to continue on. Furthermore, what you had was Hellenized Jews who said, oh, the Greeks are not that bad. It's fine. We could get along with the Greeks. But more than get along, we can actually Hellenize. We will assimilate into their culture, become part of them. And these Hellenized Jews are basically the ones who are the hedonists. They are the ones who said, you know what, we can enter into their pantheon of gods. We can enter our God and say, we're actually, we're all more or less part of this family of gods. We will become henotheistic. It's basically, we're not saying that our God is inferior to theirs, but it's all part of one pantheon, and our one is the superior one. But we're all together. Like Zeus is maybe the most powerful of the Greek gods, but our God is more powerful than Zeus, and we're all together. No, absolutely not. The rabbis and the Maccabees were revolted against them. Go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to say a quick comment that sounds like more like polytheism, and that also sounds like if you hold to that, you're inviting in spirits that, like Zeus and whatnot, you do not want in your presence. You do not. God does not allow that. God does not. God is a jealous God. We see that several times in the Old Testament. God does not want any other gods before him. He does not want you to worship any other god except him.
Exactly.
And this is what both Jews and Christians.
And this is what those rabbis, or the Maccabees, they stood up against. Now we'll talk about the bloody civil war and war against them in a moment. First, I want to give you John 10, 22, 23. That's where it states, quote, "Then came the festival of dedication at Jerusalem. It was considered that, and Jesus was in the temple. It was winter. Sorry, it was winter, and Jesus was in the temple courts, walking in Solomon's colonnade." Unquote. So, festival of dedication is another word for Hanukkah. That is where you'll find the verse that Jesus celebrated Hanukkah. Okay, so the Jews rebelled. And they did not only rebel, the Maccabees did not only rebel against the Greeks, they rebelled against the Hellenized Jews. There's one harrowing, very, very graphic story of a Jew that was about to sacrifice a pig to Zeus. And this was in public, full view of everybody, and nobody stood up to do anything about it. Matasyahu, who was the high priest, who's not supposed to, remember this, high priests are not supposed to be generals in war. They're not supposed to kill anybody because as you kill somebody, and this only applies to Jews, if you kill a Jew, then, or if you touch a dead person, you become profane, and you have to use the ash of the red heifer, as that was not too long ago. I read the red heifer story was big not too long ago, but you have to use the ash of the red heifer to purify oneself. And the high priest and priests in general are not allowed to get impure in the first place. The Levites and Israelites are allowed to get impure, but then they'll have to purify themselves. But the priests are never allowed, and if they are, then they have to repent, and also get the ash of the red heifer. But he was so enraged that there was no time. This was not a time for obeying this specific law. This was not a time. This was in time of crisis. He took up his sword and slaughtered not only the Jew the Hellenized Jew who was about to sacrifice a pig to Zeus, but also killed the Greek garrison. And this was maybe a band of 60 Jews. This rebellion only started with around 60 Jews who rebelled against the Seleucids, and they started killing Jews and Greeks alike who did not recognize the one true God. Why is this significant? Why are the Jews now killing themselves? It's because the Hellenized Greek culture has perverted Judaism so bad, so terribly, that it had to be rooted out. And this is where I see the miracle of Hanukkah being much more significant than oil lasting 8 days. Because even if the oil didn't last 8 days, Judaism would still survive. You would not be able to fulfill God's commandment. That is not the worst thing. The worst thing is if Judaism doesn't survive. And Judaism was not supposed to survive when all things are considered. I've studied the time period and I see how bad it was at the time. And it was by pure miracle. Sorry, it was a miracle that the Jews were able to expel the Greeks and rebel against the Seleucids, and furthermore protect the Jewish values. Because don't forget, if it weren't for Hanukkah, then there would be no Jesus, there would be no nothing, because it would end right there. It was supposed to end, everything was supposed to end right there. Everybody was just going with the flow. Let's just go with the Greeks. It's easier. We don't have to rebel against them. Life is pretty good. They're giving us Olympics. They're giving us exercise, eating healthy, muscular. They say worship oneself. Your body's a temple. This is awesome. They're bringing olive oil. I don't know, but they're doing all these cool and amazing things. This is so great. Why are we supposed to rebel against them? The Greeks didn't just oppress the Jews.
Sounds familiar.
What?
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. The Greeks didn't just oppress the Jews. They came with an interesting ideology. It's called hedonism, otherwise known as Satanism. Do as thou wilt. Do as it easy. Stop with these old ways of blessing God with burning them. Lighting the menorah and sacrificing animals to I don't know what. Who cares? Live it easy. Eat grapes. Drink wine. Have promiscuous sex. Kill your unborn. Kill your born, as the Spartans did, because they're inconvenient to you. I mean, a lot of things that the Greeks represented was just hedonistic, satanic behavior, and it would have been much more easier for them to say, you know what? Let's just go with the flow. They're not, they're oppressing our old ways, but they're not oppressing us. They don't want to kill us. They just want us to assimilate into the sophisticated religion. They're much more sophisticated than us.
Allegedly.
Go ahead.
Allegedly sophisticated religion.
Well, they had the great philosophers, so of course they would consider themselves to be more sophisticated than Judaism. They had the great philosophers, they had the great minds, so why not? They're so cool. They are the cool kids. The Jews with their outdated ways, why are we supposed to uphold our traditions to the one true God? Come on, guys, it's much more easier. But,
right.
Go ahead.
There's nothing new the sun.
That true. That is from the Old Testament. But that was what was the mood at the time. This is what most people at the time, most mind you, most Jews were like. It's much more easier to go with the Greeks. It's easier just to just take it easy. Stop.
Go along to get along.
Yeah, but this is why they had to start slaughtering those Jews who were of that mindset because they were a danger. They were the people who are spraying the water on the fire of God. They're the people who are saying that cool it down. It's easier. Let's just take it easy. And those are the ones that first got slaughtered. After that, the fire reignited and the Jews started the rebellion and defeated the Greeks. The Greeks were at that time, I think, aside from the Romans, who were at the time still, they were in their infancy, but the Greeks were at the time the superpower of the world, and the Jews defeated them after multiple battles. It was not after the Jews retook Jerusalem. You think it was over? No, they still had to go a long way. Furthermore, the entire family of Matthew was killed, and we're talking about Matthew, the high priest. The entire family was killed, but it was all worth it in the end of the day. So here's something I found highly hilarious. Certain Christians, so-called Christians, they count themselves as Christians, although I always question their theology when it comes to this. They say F Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, as if it has to be said, as if it's in conflict with one another. Again, as you guys know, I am a religious separatist. I don't want to mix the two because Hanukkah represents one thing and Christmas represents an entirely different thing. So mixing the two is just a secular attempt of secularizing everything and making everything take away the significance of each other. But
you don't have to be generic and say happy holidays.
And no, happy holidays is the worst. It is sterile. It is retarded. It's made for the retards. It definitely is something that should not be said. No, happy holidays doesn't belong even in any polite society.
Like if I were to say Merry Christmas to you, not knowing you, you wouldn't be offended by that.
No, why would I be offended? I say Merry Christmas to whoever. I say Merry Christmas.
That's
I mean, like what?
That's what happened, right? That's why they stole Merry Christmas away from us because people were getting offended.
Oh, don't worry. There are certain Jews that definitely do get offended. I've seen them. One Jew said, "Well, this Christian told me Merry Christmas," and I was like, I didn't know how to take it. I'm like, "What do you mean you didn't know how to take it? Just smile and say Merry Christmas back." I mean, what do you mean you didn't know how to take it? Like, what is so hard to take here? So I was absolutely flabbergasted. Like, okay, it's not your holiday. Who cares? Like, who cares? It's not your holiday. Fine. Can you please be a mensch, as we say in Yiddish, a mensch? Can you please be a mensch and say Merry Christmas back? Like, it's not that hard. But
hey, mensch on a bench. I know what that is.
So but mixing the two and saying mixing the two, putting the menorah near the Christmas tree, I hate that because people think, oh, it's one thing. No, it's not one thing. There's significance to one and significance to the other. Let's keep it separate but equal. Yeah, I know, ironic, but let's keep it separate but equal. But nonetheless, it is separate. And let's not take away from the significance of each other. But that's what the secularists want to do. They want to make it, it's all one happy family. No, it's not one happy family. It's two separate, distinct families, which is fine. It's okay. There's no problem with it, but you cannot say that Hanukkah is like Christmas. It is not. So you guys know that this is my opinion, that keep the religions.
Well,
Go ahead.
I have an uncle. My uncle is Jewish and my aunt was Catholic. And so they had both holidays in their home for their daughter and taught them both of the traditions. And they existed just fine.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah. So that's fine, as long as you understand that it's separate. But what we see right here, right nowadays, is that we place the Christmas tree near the menorah, and we say, "Oh, it's one thing." It's not one thing. It's not. So, where was I going with this? You guys know that I am a religious separatist when it comes to this. Separate but equal because otherwise it takes away from the significance of each other. Go ahead, Matt.
Well, to be fair, you have been saying Matthew a lot. No. Anyway,
It's the same name, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's funny. I had someone recently tell me, "Oh, I'll remember your name because you're named after a book of the Bible." But anyway, I found it interesting that somebody I like, Colonel Rob Manus, was recently sharing that he celebrates Hanukkah even though he's a Christian. So that was kind of interesting. So that this topic you're bringing up is all interesting
Is
to
he
me for
Catholic?
that reason. No,
Interesting.
I don't know. He just said he's
Okay,
Christian.
so if that person is Catholic, well, that will kind of make sense, and I'll say in a moment why. So, as you know, I'm separatist on this, but here's the thing: why am I seeing posts of F Hanukkah? I'm not offended by it. I'm just amused and absolutely, I'm so amused and I love it because it's funny. I love comedy, and they are comedians making comedians out of themselves. They're making fun of themselves when they say that F Hanukkah, but Merry Christmas, because
It's just another attack on Jews.
yeah, that's basically what they want to do. But I'm like, listen, there's a way of being Jew hating and making sense. There's a way of doing it. Like Jews control the banks. Like that kind of makes sense. Jews control the media or Hollywood or whatever. That kind of makes sense because disproportionately they're represented there. So it makes sense. You can do it in a way that it makes sense. But then there's the retarded way when you go and you dunk on your own self. Like I see Christians, so-called Christians. Again, it's always when I go and attack these Christians, I always try to say so-called Christians because they don't really know the theology of their own religion. They attack the flesh mutilators. Who are the flesh mutilators? Those are circumcised. It's mutilating of the flesh. It's evil. I'm like, okay, then why did God command Abraham to do it? Like, you're going to attack the circumcision, but then, you're going to say that Jesus is God. Well, if Jesus is the same God of the Bible, then please ask Jesus why the hell he ordered Abraham to mutilate his flesh, and same with Moses and all the Israelites. Like, what the hell are you even doing? What are you doing? You can say it's not necessary anymore. That's not a contradiction. That is fine. But you can't say that it's evil and then say that Jesus is good. Because Jesus is the same God that ordered the circumcision. That would make Jesus evil. You cannot the cognitive dissonance is absolutely so astounding that I laugh every time I see them. So they love dunking on Judaism, but I'm like, you're not even dunking on Judaism. You're dunking on your own religion. There's an effective way of hating the Jews. You're not doing it. This ain't it. So this is
I am going to say that I'm going to stop you right there and say that it is necessary, and we're just going to go with that.
so to the point. They attack Hanukkah. So I'm like, I don't care. Whatever. Like, their opinion is worthless to me. But you do realize that Hanukkah, the Nes is Hebrew for miracle. The miracle of Hanukkah is recorded in the Apocrypha, which the Catholics hold as being part of the Old Testament. So if you're Catholic and attacking Hanukkah, you're just retarded. You're literally retarded. I don't know how to help you because it is literally part of your Old Testament. Literally, it's not part of the Jewish Old Testament because we did not want to recognize it as such. Multiple reasons. One of not least of which is it was the first one was written in Hebrew, but it was then the first part of Maccabees was written in Hebrew, but then that was lost, and the rest of it was written in Greek, translated by the Septuagint, and we cannot accept that as being part of the Apocrypha. As being part of the Old Testament, since we have no way of verifying its authenticity. That is one thing. We use the Masoretic text, which, again, I had this conversation with some retard about, which is older, the Septuagint or Masoretic text. And I told him, no, it's the Masoretic text that is, of course, younger, but it is all verified by the Dead Sea Scrolls. The person really was non-cooperative, really didn't get it. But the point is that we never could have been verified it, so we didn't include it because we do suspect that it may have been influenced by certain Hellenized Jews. So we don't want that being part of the Old Testament. Because we're afraid, we're wary. But the other reason is, and that is a practical reason, but the other reason is it's not necessary to be part of the Old Testament. We don't attack it. We don't say that, don't read this, it's evil or anything. It's fine. It's there. It exists. You can read it. It is an interesting story that you can read. You can definitely recognize it as being part of Jewish literature. No problem with that. You just don't recognize it as being as God's word, since there's no way of verifying it. So we can't canonize it. So it's not in the Jewish canon, but it is definitely part of Jewish culture. So it cannot be canonized. And that's why it wasn't canonized. But in Catholic theology, it was canonized. Excuse me. But in Protestant it is not part. It's not canonized at all. It is also recognized as apocrypha, but still, it's not really. It's not authoritative at all in Catholic theology. Sorry, in Protestant theology. So if you're Catholic and you attack the you attack the Book of Maccabees by attacking Hanukkah, I'm like, Jesus, you're now attacking also Jesus, by the way, because John, as I mentioned, he celebrated Hanukkah. So good on you for that. You're now attacking what your own God did. It's so retarded. You're attacking Jesus' work, what he has done on Hanukkah. You are attacking him celebrating Hanukkah because of Hanukkah, right? So what the hell are you even doing here? So that is on that part. It's retarded. But then to the Protestants, I also ask, again, Jesus celebrated Hanukkah. Why the hell are you attacking Hanukkah? It is part of the Christian ethos as well. Again, if the Jews did not beat the Seleucids, Christianity would not exist. Do you understand the significance of that? There is no reason. You don't have to celebrate Hanukkah, but you cannot say that Hanukkah is so terrible, evil, nasty, and you shouldn't celebrate it because the Jews, the scary Jews, they celebrate Hanukkah. Like, what the hell are you doing? JOOS. Those damn Jews who are probably part of the international banks. They are controlling the international banks, and this is why they're giving out Hanukkah geld. Geld meaning money. They're giving out Hanukkah money. Oh, they're so evil. Like, what are you even doing? You can hate the Jews. You want to hate the Jews? You can do it. I mean, you're not my friend, but you can do it. But there's an effective way of doing it, then there's the retarded way. And attacking Hanukkah is absolutely retarded. You're attacking your own religion. You're discrediting your own religion. Do you understand that? Do you understand that Jesus celebrated Hanukkah? Do you realize that? So many Christians that...
Are you going to start up a how to attack the Jews?
Oh yeah, I definitely should. Like, there's certainly a lot of ways of attacking the Jews that is actually effective. But this ain't it. Not least of which you're starting a pogrom, but that's a little dark humor. But nonetheless, if you are of that mindset of the Hanukkah crowd, if you're of the crowd of Hanukkah, you're retarded. You are retarded. You need help. There's probably some kind of Jewish psychiatrist I can send you to. You need somebody. Maybe you need some Jewish lawyer to help you out with the legalistics of God's commandments. But just know you are retarded. Furthermore, here's the interesting thing. There is a video. I could go to my profile if you want to see the video of the oldest menorah ever found. The oldest menorah that was ever found so far. It is amazing. It is from around the year 70 AD. That is the time when the temple was destroyed to around 200. Like, basically at the start of Christianity. The menorah. So in other words, Jews were lighting the menorah so early in the time, so early that you can realize that when you see Jews lighting, or I mean, you can't see literally, but when you understand that the Jews were lighting the menorah so early after the event of the beating the Seleucids, they were already doing that. This is discussed in the Talmud, which again only makes legitimate the oral law, because there's nowhere in the Old Testament where, aside from Maccabees, there's nowhere in the Old Testament. I think also actually Maccabees, it's not even discussed that you should be lighting the menorah. That is a later Jewish invention, again, created by the rabbis, again, which is in the Talmud, again, because Jesus did fulfill the oral law. He was a Pharisaic Jew. He was a Pharisee. Again, it's like I always have to repeat that you're attacking the Pharisees. He was a Pharisee. He was part of the temple. He was in there. Like, all these things can be verified very easily, not least of which is the menorah is old about as Jesus himself. And so and their argument basically, I didn't explain why this is significant, because their argument basically is that the Talmud was written down about 500 years after Jesus' death. Yeah, that's true, but that is a legalistic term. It's inaccurate to say that that's when all the things happened in the Talmud. The Talmud recorded the things that happened even before the time of Jesus, not least of which was lighting the menorah, which happened even before the time of Jesus. So their argument is 500 years after Jesus, That's when they invented the oral law. No, the oral law existed before him. We can clearly see the Mishnah was written before the time of Jesus. The Gemara, which is a compilation of the Mishnah and the Talmud, which is a compilation of the Gemara and the Mishnah, that was written down way after Jesus. But again, written down, the events took place before, after, and during the time of Jesus. Let's go to Matthew. Matt, go ahead.
So sorry, I was sending a text.
Go ahead.
I just want to echo what you were saying about attacking the Jews, because I've said there that it is kind of retarded to attack them in that way. And also, if you want to say all those things you said about the Jews, fine. Those people, as far as I'm concerned, are secular Jews. They are not religious Jews. So I think there's that distinction that I think we have to make, and it's just like Catholics. Now, I'm not Catholic. I'm Protestant. So you saw me doing all those thumbs up. I'm not. I say the same thing about all these Catholics who are for child killing in the womb via abortion. Those people to me, like, yeah, y'all got stuff going on there too. But then it's like you get this conversation. I'm always hesitant to go there, because it will either go one of two ways. It will either go one way that it's all way out there, and then you get into some serious territory in a bad way. But
Aaron,
on the other hand, there are people who will call you anti-Semitic and say, "Hey, don't go there at all." But anyway, I do want to ask. So, when was the first recorded celebration of Hanukkah? When was that? It was about what'd you say? 23. It was. I'm sorry. I don't mean to put words in your mouth here, but when was the recorded? I guess first.
As far as I know, I mean, I guess the first recorded. I don't know when the first recorded was, but it's definitely not any less than what John 10:22-3, when Jesus was celebrating Hanukkah. So it's definitely not there's nothing later than that, right? I don't know what the first one is, but I mean, and when I say the first one, I mean it in the way that the first, what you would consider traditional, meaning the lighting of the menorah, because they didn't immediately, as far as I know, they didn't immediately say that Jews need to light the menorah the first year or so. I'm pretty sure that came sometime after. I'm not sure. But the point is that I don't know. I don't know what the first traditional Hanukkah recording of traditional Hanukkah happened, but definitely not. But definitely, it was already well in full effect in the time of Jesus. And again, remember, mind you, this is something that you need to remember. One of my proofs that Jesus was a Pharisee, not least of which the Old Testament itself claims that. I mean, not explicitly, but implicitly. Not least of which is this chapter in and of itself explaining that Jesus was celebrating Hanukkah, which is a rabbinic invention. This is an invention by the rabbis. They invented it. This is not a God. This is not commanded by God. Hanukkah was created by the rabbis, yet Jesus had no problem celebrating it, which is part of the oral Torah. Now, why is that? Why would Jesus, if the oral Torah or the Talmud is so evil, then why would Jesus adhere to the Talmud? And by the way, also for Muslims, just for the record, for the Muslims, if you're listening, I would also like to ask you something that you never have an answer to, because there is no answer, because your prophet did copy from Judaism and Christianity. What they copied from Judaism is from the Talmud, that when somebody kills a person, it's like they killed all human beings. That is from the Talmud. You ripped off the Talmud. So since the Talmud is so evil and terrible, you will have to explain why your Quran copies the Talmud. There, you don't really have an answer to that, because the Talmud is not satanic. You guys are retarded. That's what's really happening here. Go ahead, Kim.
I love the way that you discuss these things that have like been the fundamentals of like lots and lots of strife, if you will. So the sacred holidays, let's say, that they were laid out in Leviticus, correct?
The holidays, Leviticus basically more or less has I think the majority of the Jewish commandments. Yes.
And so you said that Hanukkah was called something else, and I don't remember what it was. But
What the Old Testament calls it is the dedication. The festival of dedication. Kim?
so which are the holidays that are laid out in Leviticus?
I don't know all of them. It's kind of hard to remember.
Well, but they're like the most significant ones that they talk about it, like in the beginning.
I don't know if this one is in Leviticus, but it may be in one of the other books. But if you're dealing with the 5 books of Moses, the most significant ones are Yom Kippur, that is the Day of Atonement, that is the holiest of the holidays. Sukkot, which is, I think it's a festival of tabernacles. Basically, I think so. I don't remember how it's translated to English, but it is where you go outside and you sit effectively it's a hut. You go outside and you're connected with God. Your roof is basically just leaves over your head, and only to signify the Jews, when they headed out of Egypt, they were surrounded by a cloud of that protected them from the elements. And that is what that is to signify.
Is the Passover?
Then there's Passover, of course. That is one where the Jews were taken out of Egypt. What are the other large one? Shavuot, or Shvius in Hebrew. That is the one where God gave the Jews the Torah. So that is also a big one.
So how come Christians don't celebrate a lot of these holidays?
Correct. Christians do not celebrate, but it'll be kind of retarded for Christians to say that Shavuot is a terrible, evil, satanic holiday, right? Everybody's going to be like, wait, that commemorates the giving of the Bible. Like, wait, what? So
why don't Christians though celebrate any of these traditionally Jewish holidays that, obviously if Christianity, the Old Testament is included in the canon of Christianity, why are not more of these old Judeo,
I would say is because Christianity needed to distinguish itself from Judaism. It needed to separate itself. Otherwise, it would have been recognized as being part of just being another Jewish offshoot. There were a lot of Jewish sects at the time. There were the Islam, though those were they were a retarded group of Jews who they they believed that since on Saturday you have to keep the Saturday holy, and you're supposed to keep it holy and rest on the Shabbos, that is Saturday. You're not allowed, therefore, to go to the bathroom. You're not allowed to relieve yourself. They believe that. That's where the Islam at the time of the Second Temple.
That is part.
Yes, and they were shunned. They were kicked out of Judaism. They were kicked out, and it is recognized as they're possibly the authors behind the Dead Sea Scrolls, according to Orthodox Judaism. It's not clear that they did it, but it's widely accepted that they are the ones, because they also wrote down a whole bunch of other things that is not part of the canon of Jewish canon, which we say that, okay, since it's not part of the Jewish canon, it seems as though our Masoretic text, which, by the way, Masoretic means Masoretic. Masoretic means that was given down from father to son, meaning that we can verify that this is actually part of the original Judaism. We can verify that. Now, I can't verify that. We're talking about 1,000 years ago. They were able to verify because they had a whole bunch of other texts that were written down way earlier, now lost the time, that they could have verified the Masoretic text, saying that this was part of the original Judaism. But the Dead Sea Scrolls, it verifies the Masoretic text as being correct, but the Masoretic text does not verify the Dead Sea Scrolls, mostly because it was written way after, but also because there are certain books, there are certain writings that we do not recognize being part of the canon. So they would have known, the people who wrote the Masoretic text, they would have known about these extra texts. They never wrote it down. Why is that? Because they recognize it as being part either of the Islam or the Sadducees, which, by the way, this is another fun joke, not joke, it's a joke of them, but another fun fact about those who say that the Talmud corrupted Judaism. What we need Judaism is the pure Judaism. It's just the 5 books of Moses and the writings and the Old Testament. You know what? Sadduceic Judaism is that. But yet, for some reason, Jesus rebuked them as well. So I would really like to know, why the hell would that happen? Why the hell would the Christians not accept the Sadducees? Because the Sadducees is literally that. They are the ones who rejected the oral Torah. They did not adhere to the Pharisaic law. They did not adhere to the Hanukkah laws. They didn't celebrate Hanukkah because Hanukkah is a man-made holiday. They rejected it, saying that no, it's a rabbinic holiday. They are making the same arguments that the Sadducees were making back in the day. That no, it's a man-made holiday. It's a man-made religion because you're adhering to the Talmud and all the other things. Those arguments are very old. Those are part of the Sadducee arguments. But yet, Christians think of the Sadducees as being also evil. Why is that? Oh, because the Sadducees were terrible. They were evil. Now, with
Explain
the
what the Sadducees are, please.
So, as I said, the Sadducees are the lesser religious people because they adhered only to the 5 books of Moses and the Old Testament. They did not adhere to the rabbinic law. They actually, ironically enough, started out as a much more religious type of Jew. The Sadducees, the name in Hebrew would be Tzedoki. The Tzedokim, or that's multiple. Tzedokim is multiple. They stem from one guy named Tzudoik. So that's where Tzedoki or Sadducee comes from. Tzudoik was actually a very pious gentleman, and he was a very religious person, and seeked to really establish himself as a religious person. So his followers, though, perverted the law and stopped worshiping God the way it was supposed to be through Pharisaic law, through the rabbinic law, and they stopped listening to the rabbis. But here's the thing: the Sadducees were the upper crust elite of Judaism. They were the elitists. They were in charge of the temple as well as the Pharisees. They were so bad. By the way, it was so bad that for a time they controlled a majority of the Sanhedrin, which was more or less like the Jewish parliament, but it's instead of a parliament as of legislators, it's a parliament of judges. So the Sanhedrin was basically all the greatest minds of the rabbis, and they were all gathered together and they were the only ones that were able to give a death sentence, for instance. More or less, except from the king, but they were the only ones that were allowed to give death sentences religious. They were the ones who established the religious matters at the time, and the Sadducees controlled for a short period of time the majority of it, but then they were completely rooted out. You know who helped root them out? And I mean, it was some kind of a genocide, I guess. A Jewish king named John Hyrcanus, who had a Sadducee as a brother named Astrobulus. Astrobulus is the one, by the way, who invited the Romans to Judea. He wanted the throne. John Hyrcanus had the throne. He threw John Hyrcanus off. Hyrcanus would have been, I guess his name would have been Yochanan. In his Hebrew name would have been Yochanan. He kicked him off. Astrobulus kicked him off. And after the Romans got tired and stopped helping the Astrobulus, then Hyrcanus came back, and he inflicted a huge loss for the Sadducees, destroyed them completely, that their power was reduced to almost nothing, and he also inflicted a genocide on the what are they called again? The Samaritans, because the Samaritans were always causing trouble, and this is no judgment of the Samaritans of nowadays, but okay, what I'm about to say, I need you guys to understand, I'm talking about in the past. I'm not talking about Samaritans that are alive now. Okay, the Samaritans were an evil people that constantly were a thorn in the side of the Jews. This, by the way, is recognized by the Old Testament as well. So anybody who's offended by this, read your Bible. The Samaritans were a collection of groups of people. I guess they were Semites, but they were a group of people who they were a mix of Persian, Greek, Canaanite, Phoenician, what else? Arabian, Arabs, and they basically created their own nation, more or less, and they settled there. And their 11th commandment, we all know the 10 commandments, right? As far as I may be mistaken, Wait a minute. Let me just verify before I make this claim. Let me just
So
verify
while
this.
you do that, I think it's interesting because every time you say Samaritan, of course, I think of Good Samaritan, right? Because that's what our culture knows. So obviously, Samaritan comes from these people. And it's interesting that they are all kind of coalescing together in their different backgrounds and things like that. So I find that to be really interesting.
Can we even have a Good Samaritan law on the books?
Okay, yeah, I can verify it right now. Yeah, so we all have the 10 Commandments, right? It makes sense. The 10 Commandments are just things that it makes sense. You read it, you're like, yeah, self-evident. It's easy to understand, and it's actually pretty balanced out very well. 5 here, 5 there, right? Samaritans believe in a 11th commandment. That's immediately when you're like, okay, so what is that 11th commandment? The 11th commandment is that you shall build an altar on Mount Gerizim as the additional commandment. This is delivered from Deuteronomy 11, 29, 30, and 27, 4, 7 in their text. They have a different Bible than us. And the 11th commandment is that you shall worship God on Mount Gerizim in Israel. That is weird. I mean, that is very weird. Why would God gave you specific commandments, very easy, general commandments that everybody should understand, and then the 11th commandment is worship me on Mount Gerizim. That sounds made up. That sounds hella made up, which it is. It is made up. I don't care. I don't care who I offend, which Samaritan might be listening right now and they will offend. I don't care if you're offended. I'm saying that is freaking made up.
Hey, Aaron, I've got all sorts of other ideas for the 11th commandment if you want to hear them.
No, not that. Just give me a minute to finish. I'll allow you, but just let me finish this point. So the 11th commandment is obviously made up. It's because they were in constant conflict with the Jews at the time because Judaism was they were sacrificing to God on the mount, on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, and the other one and the competition to that was Mount Gerizim. The problem is that since the Jews didn't want to submit to the Samaritans' way of life, and the Jews actually saw it kind of a threat, what they were doing, a lot of them were genocided by the king, by King Hyrcanus, and this actually came, but this is not like, oh, they just decided to genocide them. No, this came after years of not direct persecution, but them being like the classroom tattletale. They went to the Persians, said, "Hey, Persian king." This is when they were building the second temple. They went to Cyrus the Great. Said, "Hey, Cyrus, the Jews, they want to build this new temple, but they're going to want to rebel against you." They started turning the wheels, trying to make movement on evil things to happen. So they were like always a thorn in the Jewish side, trying to change the way it's supposed to be. So the Jews were sick and tired of the Samaritans. This is why it is recorded in the Talmud that he inflicted a huge loss for the Samaritans. Now, no hatred towards Samaritans nowadays. I mean, it'll be retarded if I hated them. Like, come on, that's not how we roll. But just saying, this is the past of the Samaritan, recorded in the Bible. This is biblical stuff. If anybody has a problem with it, then you're free to erase that from the Bible, which I don't believe you will. That is biblical.
You know, this is something that, and Matt, I'll let you go right after this. This is something that really should be talked about um, in the beginnings of a civics class, because I think that people don't really understand, and I think they take for granted the fact that you can believe what you want to believe in this country. You can have your, your point of view in this country, and you're not going to be genocided. Whereas it seems in this time that you're talking about, people were just getting killed left and right for having a differing view.
Well, it's a little different. It's not just killing left and right for having a different view. They were arch enemies of Judaism. That's why there was constant warfare between the two. But final note, in the time of the Talmud, by the way, the Samaritans, what the Talmud records is that the Samaritans had a altar to a bird god. So at the time they were worshiping idols. Nowadays, there is no bird god or any such so-called idol on Mount Gerizim. They still do their worshiping, the prayers to God of the 5 books of Moses. They have a different version, but as far as I know, they don't really live in sin now. I wouldn't say they live in sin, and I would say that they seem like very hospitable people. No problems here. Just saying, biblically speaking, this is the past. This is what happened, and this is why the Pharisees committed genocide. I call it genocide because that's more or less what it was. It was trying to eradicate this element of people from Israel because they were constantly causing trouble. Now, this is all verified by the New Testament as well. As you brought up a very interesting thing, the Good Samaritan, right? Why is the Good Samaritan so talked about? Like who cares? Like, why do we really talk about a person doing the right thing? It's because it was breaking. It's what Jesus was saying is that between who we all know is a good person, like we all know that the Pharisee or the normal Orthodox Jew should be a good person, or this person, or the Greek, just a normal person. And then we have the evil, nasty, hated Samaritan. If the evil, nasty, hated Samaritan does a good thing, is it good? That's more or less, I'm generalizing more or less what Jesus said, but that's more or less what he said. Is it the right thing to do? And the student said, yeah, it's the right thing to do. The Samaritan did the right thing, and it's good. That's where the Good Samaritan comes into play, because what Jesus was doing is saying that more or less everybody's created equal before God, and this person who you consider to be the worst of the worst. They are the Samaritans. They are the arch enemy of the Jews. They are in competition with the Jews. They have their own Bible, which perverts the original Jewish Bible. They constantly go to the authorities in Rome and Greece and Persia, and they always try to attack the Jews because they are in conflict between each other, because the Jews worship the God on the Temple Mount, and they are worshiping some bird gods on Mount Gerizim. They are so similar. It's very similar, by the way. I watched some videos of them. They are incredibly similar to our traditions. Incredibly. They still celebrate Sukkot, although not the way our rabbis ordered, but they still celebrate it. They celebrate, as far as I know, they celebrate Passover. They write in ancient Hebrew. There are two. At the time, there were two different ways of writing in Hebrew. There was the Assyrian way. It's called Ashir. It's basically what you would recognize nowadays as Hebrew letters. Whatever you see nowadays, Hebrew letters, that is the Assyrian type of writing system that the Jews adopted. And then there is the ancient Hebrew, which is called Ksav Ivri, which means there's Ksav Ashiris and Ksav Ivri. Ksav means writing in Hebrew. So Ksav Ivri is the ancient Hebrew way of writing, and they still write in the ancient Hebrew. We have long went past that. We don't write anymore. It's ancient. It's basically the same as ancient Phoenician. So we have long past that one. We are now writing in Ksavashiris. Everything our Torah is written in the Ksavashiris, in the ancient in a different writing system. Which, by the way, the Talmud is written the same way, but they still write in the other ancient, in the original, I guess, Hebrew, which is pretty interesting if you really think about it. And they also, I think, they also wear some kind of cloth over their head, which looks like a talus. They are very, very similar. Like when I saw the video of them, of their behavior, their holidays, I was like, if I walked into one of their so-called synagogues, I would think that I'm just in a unique synagogue. I would think that I'm an actual Orthodox Jewish synagogue. It's incredibly similar, but then you see the differences between the two, and you realize, oh, wait a minute, there's a difference. There's a lot of sad story behind what's actually happened here, but they're still around. You know, God bless them. They're not living in sin, as far as I know. They're not living in sin. They bow to the one true God, right? So I don't really see the sin there. Their ancestors, though, as the Talmud records, they definitely were living in sin, and as the New Testament records, they were seen as the vile, evil people, and Jesus was trying to normalize saying that you do not even know them. How can you hate them? You don't know who they are as people. You cannot hate just the random person. They also count as your neighbor. That is why Jesus brought it up. Otherwise, it wouldn't have even mattered. Why even talk about it? Like, if the good person does, sorry, if a person does a good thing, then it's good. Why make the distinction of a person doing good and then saying, what about the Samaritan? Because
and at
the
first,
Samaritan was never looked at that way. They were always looked at as being evil, and Jesus was making the argument that even if you look at that person as evil, if that person does the right thing, then that person is a good person, and you should applaud that.
well, it's very interesting that they have that term is such a positive term in today's culture. And I want to get to Matt
Yes.
because I know he's got some questions.
Yes, Matt, go ahead.
I was just going to say that doing good, but I think the point that Jesus was trying to make with that parable is that doing good, you should do good to your fellow man because it's objectively good, not because, oh, this person's an outcast, let me help them. No, that person is that person's a fellow image bearer. That person is also made in the image of God. For goodness sake, Satan hates all of us. I mean, are you made in the Imago Dei? Yes. Okay, then Satan hates you every bit as much as he hates Kim, Aaron, everybody in here. So that and to broaden the conversation a bit to pop culture, we used to and I promise I'm not trying to hijack the space. There's a reason I'm bringing
You're
this
not hijacking anything. You're free to go. Continue.
up. But there's a reason I'm bringing this up, because we used to portray our heroes like Superman and some of these other guys for doing just that. They went out and they did good because it was objectively good, emulating some of those teachings of Christ. And so that shows you the impact and the and the reach and the influence of Christ more than anything is that you can take these ideas and you can turn them into and you can make characters and whatnot out of them. But that's really the point here, is that you should want to do good because it's objectively good, not because of not because of anything that person said or done.
Let's. By the way, you know what? Let's read the New Testament here. And I know Vinny really wanted me to read the New Testament. I know he asked me that.
Let's do it.
So let's go. And this is from the NIV. Okay, for those who are wondering. Okay, this is Luke 10:25 and 37. And I'm reading this just for clarification. I'm reading this because this is relevant to the discussion. But we're talking so everybody knows exactly what we're talking about here. Okay, 25. And guys, before I start, I have dyslexia, so bear with me. It's kind of hard, but it's not terrible. But you'll be able to notice it shortly. Don't worry. Okay, 25. On the occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. He asked, "What must I do to inherit eternal life?" "What is written in the law?" he replied. "How do you read it?" He answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." "You have answered correctly," Jesus replied. "Do this and you will live." But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" See, this is exactly what I actually brought up earlier. I said that Jesus was trying to make the argument that the Samaritan is your neighbor. Now, how does this tie into everything? Let's see. In reply, Jesus said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of all his clothes and beat him and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too a Levite, when he came to the place and he saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where he saw where the man was. And when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day, he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell onto the hands of the robbers? The expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. Jesus told him, go and do likewise. You see? You see what's going on here? So Jesus is telling you that the Samaritan, the evil, vile, terrible Samaritan that you all hated all this entire time, that person is your neighbor. Remember that. Which a lot of Jews didn't wanted to see them as their neighbor. This is, by the way, in part why you could say that Jews or the Pharisees may or may not have hated Jesus, because he was again some. And for the retards out there, I already explained in the previous space this word I'm about to use. He was a hippie rabbi. If you want to go back to the other space, and you'll understand why I say he was a hippie rabbi who was heterodox, and that created a lot of enemies. So therefore, he was I guess a threat to the status quo. But nonetheless, what he's teaching here is, I guess, it is true generally. I would say it is definitely true. And but at the time, it was considered so outrageous that you would consider the terrible, evil Samaritan, who has this entire time, all the time, has been attacking Jews, tattletaling to the Romans, to the Greeks, to the Persians, to every major empire, trying to destroy the Second Temple because they were in competition. So they were reviled and hated. Jesus says, they're still, I understand you may have prejudices towards them, but they're still your neighbor. And therefore, you, Pharisee Jew, you Sadducee Jew, you Greek, you, everybody, you still have to adhere to God's law. And that means you have to treat him, as long as that person didn't do you evil, treat as you want to be treated, the golden rule, right? As long as he is not your enemy, like you know for a fact this person is your enemy, such as this person wants to kill you. But if this person doesn't want to kill you, doesn't want anything bad to you, you cannot judge this person, and therefore he's your neighbor, and therefore you have to have the same grace that you would have your fellow Pharisee Jew. You have to have the Samaritan as well. You have to recognize him. And Samaritans were not recognized as being complete Jews at the time, although this is up for debate. They were recognized as, but interesting, they were recognized as being somewhat Jews. It's a very interesting dynamic here, because it's not completely clear what the rabbis characterized the Samaritans. In the Talmud, you can see that one rabbi brings up an argument saying that Samaritans are totally evil or terrible or whatever, or I don't remember exactly what what they said, but the other rabbi said, silence. I will not discuss with you what the original rabbi meant by these statements. So the other rabbi replied, saying that we cannot have a discussion of this because you're taking it out of context, and we don't exactly know what the context of when this original rabbi said that the Samaritans are this kind of people. We don't know exactly what that is about. So let's not even discuss it. So you can see a little bit you can see the rabbis not exactly knowing or having lost the time the original meaning of what a Samaritan would be, but definitely they were never actually considered to be full Jews. They were never considered to be allies of the Jews. They were one of the arch enemies of the Jews at the time. Go ahead. Let's go, Matthew. You had your hand up first. Then we'll go, Kim.
I was just gonna say, while you I didn't want to interrupt, but a denarius was equivalent to a day's wage. So think about this: they gave up 2 days worth of wages to help to help that guy.
Are you sure it was a day? As my understanding, and this may be wrong because this may be maybe later on, but I think a denarius as sorry, I like pronouncing things in its original way, in its original Latin, and it would be denarius. A denarius would be actually a month's wage, as far as I know, a standard month's wage. I may be wrong on this, But as far as I remember, and maybe again I may be wrong. Do you have any source to back to that you can point?
That was I have the Founder's Bible, and it's written in the NASB, and it says it has these little notes in the text, and the one where the denarius is mentioned, it says that the denarius was equivalent to a day's wage.
Interesting, interesting. As far as I can remember, it was. Wait, sorry. Wait. Okay. No. I messed up right now. I remember now. No, an aureus was a month's wage. And an aureus is a later coin. Wait, no. An aureus is, yeah, I think it's still imperial Roman, not Byzantine. Yeah. So an aureus was the gold coin, and that was the coin that equal to about 25 denarii. So that would mean, okay, 25. Yeah. Okay. Actually, what you're saying does make sense. Yes, it does make sense. 25 denarii would equal to one aureus, and aureus is a month's wage. So yeah, actually, yeah, what you're saying does make sense. I got confused for a moment there. I thought that the denarius and the aureus, the aureus is the gold coin by which they pay the army and people. Go ahead, Kim.
Okay, so I'm going to come at this from my completely illiterate biblical self. So essentially, and I'm simplifying things for my mind, God creates the earth, creates man, man's going on along, and things get real twisted, and you got, Babylon. And so he comes down basically and floods the earth. And then, man populates again. Things are starting to take a turn for the worse. Then he comes to Abraham and makes the covenant with him, right? And then, life goes on. We as humans get twisted again. And then he decides to send in Jesus to show people that, y'all are way overthinking this. And here's how you do it. And so that's why he was a free thinking hippie, right?
By the way, Kim, it's Babel.
Babel. Got it. So is that like a very simplified sort of what we're like the events? It seems like every time that humans are they're getting way out over their skis, or they're, getting off course, there is an event where God sends someone or comes down and talks to someone and says, hey, you're doing it wrong.
More or less. Well, I mean, through a Christian point of view, definitely. The Jewish point of view is that Jesus is unnecessary, not for sacrifice, for being the last sacrifice as Jews, as God himself asks for the Jews to not give him any sacrifices, but to repent and to give charity. As well as you can see, the people of Nineveh, as you guys may recall the story of Jonah. God never asked for belief in the Trinity or any sacrifices of them. All God asked for them is to repent. So this was the main way of how God wanted people to become righteous, is to give charity and to repent. But to a Christian point of view, definitely, yeah, what you're saying there is, generally speaking, I would say that yes, that is accurate.
So when he came down and spoke with Abraham, had things started to get off the rails again?
I wouldn't say that things were getting off the rails. I mean, things were off the rails for a long time already. It's that since he recognized that there's the one true God, then God made himself known. Okay, you've realized, you've recognized, and now it's time for us to make a covenant, and it's time for to start, the Jewish nation. But things were already off the rails for a long time, especially with the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel was a rebellion against God. Now, here's the thing: when it comes to the Tower of Babel, there were three schools of thought. The first one was, we're going to rebel against God and we're going to try to kill God. That is the first one. And that is hubris, ignorance in the highest order. Then there is another one, which is just which is just ignorance, that they wanted to make a tower as for the glory of the empire. Okay, fine. That is that is arrogance, but it's not a sin to build a huge tower, but for the glory of the empire. And
Was Sodom and Gomorrah before Noah?
Sodom and Gomorrah were after.
Okay.
Sodom and Gomorrah were way after, and I think it's four cities: Sodom and Gomorrah and two others. Am I right?
Sodom and Gomorrah was during the time of Abraham
Yes.
and Lot, and because that's when Lot leaves and his wife gets turned into a pillar of salt.
Yes, correct.
Which we can make all kinds of jokes about that, but I'm not going to.
Come on.
Well, let me tell you something.
Come on, make a joke.
I'm reading the Bible with my teenager, and so when we got
terrorist?
to the part, yeah, the terrorist, and when we got to the part where the daughters get the dad drunk, I was like, I mean, how could, it was just really awkward.
Yeah, I'm not surprised, but yeah, it was it was a real sinful time. So what you can see there, by the way, also as well, what you can see there is this is another thing that a lot of Christians really don't get, because again, when you try to attack the Talmud, what happens is you kind of attack your own religion, and that is where the Talmud states that the Jews are when they want something for God, they can bend God's will, more or less. I mean, I am generalizing it. Certain Christians say, no, God's will is absolute and complete and total. You cannot bend God's will. It's impossible. Well, if you read the 5 books of Moses, you can see Abraham clearly bending God's will. Clearly, very, when he was trying to save Sodom and Gomorrah, where he said that if I find you 50 righteous people, if I find you this amount, he was, how about this amount? He was constantly negotiating with God. He was always wrestling with God. And this is why Jews are called Israel. Israel meaning wrestling with God. So there's this one guy I saw here on Twitter posting about how evil the Jews are, because the Israel meaning wrestling with God, and the Jews are constantly wrestling against, and he mistranslated. He didn't say wrestling with God. That is the translation. He translated it as wrestling against God. That is a lie. That is a nasty lie, and he's a retard. And he's significant. He's pretty significant in this realm. What is his name? I will find his Twitter handle so you can know exactly who I'm talking about. But so this guy says that the Jews are wrestling against God and they're so evil, blah 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 blah. But the thing is that wrestling, that is, first of all else, that nickname or that name Israel was given in the 5 books of Moses, and that was given to Yaakov or Jacob. Yeah, his Hebrew name is Yaakov Avini, Jacob our father. So that is 5 books of Moses, mister. What the hell are you even doing? Do you believe in the 5 books of Moses? Like, this is part of the Bible. This is part of the canon. How are you attacking your own religion? This is absolutely hilarious. So he made this claim, but again, it's in the 5 books of Moses. So this is why because the Jews are always in conflict with God, always wrestling with God. And where you can see it is, and this is, by the way, why Jews are such good lawyers, is because Abraham asked of God, what if I can find this amount of righteous people? Maybe that amount of righteous people. You can see this is part of our nature. This is part of our DNA, to wrestle with God.
Always negotiating.
Yes, always negotiating. As a matter of fact, you know how this goes. One of the most Jewish things you can do is answer a question with another question. It's part of the negotiating process, and this is exactly why the Jews also have the Talmud. What is the Talmud? It's basically a podcast of arguments and negotiations and all of it. So when people are arguing, are trying to condemn the Jews and literally anything, I'm like, first let's find out if it's biblical. The moment I see, oh, it's biblical, then what are you complaining about? What are you complaining about that the word Israel means to wrestle with God? By the way, this is a very interesting thing, and then I'll go to the hand after mentioning this. I think you guys will like this. Dennis Prager was actually asked why you wouldn't become a Muslim. Because, you should become a Muslim. And he said that, what is Islam? what does Islam mean? Islam means to submit to God. Yeah, that's basically the translation. Submit to God. And he said that he would rather wrestle with God than submit to him. That's basically the argument. And to Christians, this may sound like, oh no, like, what do you mean you're wrestling with God? Let's be real here. That's exactly what Jews did all this entire time. This is within the Jewish spirit. It's biblical. There's no way around. The Jews are always going to wrestle with God. That's how it's going to be. It's not satanic. It's not evil. God recognizes this, and this is why God calls the Jews a stiff-necked nation. It's not anti-Semitic to say, but this is exactly who we are. We're always going to be wrestling with God for a better and brighter future. And we take that from Abraham. Abraham wrestled with God. Jacob wrestled with God. All of us Jews have wrestled with God in our own time. It's always, and we just hope that when we are wrestling, we're wrestling for a more virtuous world and a more beautiful world than to create a worse world. But that is why Jews wrestle with God. Let's go to Matt.
Can you expound on that distinction? What does it mean to wrestle with God versus submit to him? Not necessarily from a Jewish perspective, just in general, just in general terms here.
To wrestle with God, again, as I said, it is basically to see some terrible thing happening, and instead of saying, okay, well, it's God's will, let's just bend to the will of God. Let's just submit to what God wants. Instead of that, it is to say, no, God, we want more. We want something different. Yeah, but you're supposed to submit. No, God, we want something more. We don't want you to kill all the people in Sodom and Gomorrah, but they deserve it. Yes, they deserve it. But can we find at least 10 people? Can we at least find 10 people who are righteous? Can we work from there? They don't deserve it, but can we still have grace? God says, okay, can you find me 10 people? Well, can we do 5? No, you have to do, but please, maybe 5. No, that is wrestling with God. It is not rebelling. There's a difference. Wait a minute. It's not a rebellion against God. There's rebellion. Rebellion is not wrestling. Rebellion would be saying that God, we don't want to do any of your commandments. We don't want to do any of it. We just want to live in a hedonistic world. That is rebellion. Then there's wrestling. It's when God says, this is going to be my punishment. This is going to be the punishment to these people. And the Jews saying, oh, can we figure this out? Like, can we work out some kind of deal here? Like, can I give you an offer you can't refuse? Is there something that we can exchange here instead of doing this? That is wrestling with God. You're not submitting to his will, but you are asking for some kind. You're like a lawyer, constantly asking, can we help out my client here with a certain way? And you can also see the same thing with Jonah, and the opposite, actually, where Jonah didn't want to save he didn't want to save the
He didn't want to go to Nineveh. He wanted to go to Tarshish. He wanted to go to Tarshish instead. And
why is that?
and
You know why? You know why he wanted to go to Tarshish?
he didn't want to go to Nineveh because he hated those people. That's why.
In part,
He didn't like those people.
You could say he hated those people, but it's a little bit more sophisticated than just hating them. And we'll go to the hands right after this.
I actually thought of another example though, talking about wrestling with God. How about Hannah?
Who?
Hannah. I think it was.
I need the Hebrew name. It's kind of hard for me when it comes to the English pronunciation.
I think it was Solomon's mother. I think no. It was one character's mother who kept praying to God for a child, and it finally happened.
I'm sorry, I can't remember which one because I need the Hebrew word. Otherwise, it just doesn't. The English words I do as well as I can, but it doesn't always work. But one thing, okay, yeah, I remember. You, as you said, Hannah, you reminded me of this is a Hanukkah story, and this is one of the Jewish resilience. And we'll go to the hands. One of excellent Jewish resilience against the what they're called again, against Antiochus. And by the way, This is also in Catholic theology. I think her name was Hannah, but I don't remember. This story is also recorded in the Catholic theology. So certainly, if you're Catholic, this might be familiar to you. There was one mother in Hanukkah that had all of her children, from the oldest to the youngest, killed by Antiochus because he didn't want because they did not want to convert and bow down to the king as a god. And he tried to bribe the smallest of the children with one thing: a coin. Like, just, I'm going to put down the coin on the ground, and if you take the coin, it'll seem as though you're bowing down to me or to the idol. So you're not actually bowing down to the idol, but it'll look like you're bowing down. So can you do that? And they didn't. So he boiled them all alive in front of their mother. And this is one of the stories of Jewish resilience against the Greeks, that we will never ever bow down to a different god than the one in the Bible. Never. It's not going to happen. I'm willing to fight for it. The question is if you are. So this is a story also recorded in Catholic theology. I don't remember exactly the name of the mother in English. For those who want, you can look. What I think the key words, if you want to look up the story, I think the key words what you can write in is Hanukkah story, basically, of mother has all of her kids killed by Antiochus. I think that will be, that'll work, and you'll find what you're looking for and see all the details of the story.
Well, let's go to Edward.
Yeah, go ahead, Edward.
Hello, Aaron. How's everybody today?
Very good. How are you? Happy Hanukkah.
It's the best day of my life. Thank you so much for the happy Hanukkah, the festival of lights. A couple questions that I have. One, Hanukkah itself, is that historical or is that something from the Torah?
Hanukkah is, of course, it is historical. You got to mute because there's feedback there. Okay, so of course it's historical, but yeah, it is from what Christians or what Catholics, Christians or Catholics, whatever, but what Catholics consider to be the New Testament, and it is in the Apocrypha, especially for the Protestants. But yeah, it is both biblical. I get for Christians or Catholics, it's biblical. For Jews, it is more historical than biblical.
But in the Christian faith, based on, like you said, Catholicism, which is not for us as believers, it's not scriptural. So thank you for answering that. The second question is the wrestle with God. Before Jacob was named Israel, I want to know from your viewpoint, was it more of God wanting Jacob to be submitted to him, to know his will, or was it more of the fact that we as God's creation get the opportunity to wrestle with him and try to make the decision of, following God versus following our own will?
Well, I wouldn't say God's creation. I would say that the Jewish nation will constantly be in wrestling with God. So it's not all creation, because not all creation is part of the Jewish nation. So for Jews, it applies because we are a stiff-necked nation, and we will constantly wrestle with God. Whenever there is some injustice in the world and God says that this is what's going to have to happen, the Jews will always constantly, as the lawyers they are, or as we are, constantly ask of God, can we work out something different? Can we not punish this person? Can we work out something for this person? Something that could benefit both of us. Is there enough righteous people? Maybe there's enough righteous people in this land that would necessitate that you can't kill them all, because they're righteous people, and they will usher in a glorious era. They just need to be awoken to what's going on. So that is the wrestling with God part. So no, it does not apply to every nation.
So that
So
the reason that you've
apparently,
got this antagonistic, right? The reason that it's so antagonistic against the Jews is because they do not submit to anyone but God, and then you get that from the Christians as well. So it's all
so the
making
reason
sense.
why,
Basically this.
yeah,
Think about it this
but
way. Think
Aaron,
about it this way.
Aaron,
Wait a minute. Think about it this way. First you accept God's commandments, right? You first accept it, and then you work within that legal framework to ask God for either favors or for Him to adhere to the law given to you through legalistic means. So, and that's where the wrestling comes in. So, without the framework of the Torah, then there is no wrestling at all. Otherwise, it's rebellion. So, God tells you this is something that you cannot go against. Okay, let's see. In this legal framework of the Torah, the commandments, the 5 books of Moses, the Old Testament, what can we accomplish through this? Okay, what we can accomplish is this, that, and the other. Okay, but God says that we should do this. Yeah, but technically speaking, we can do that. That is working within the confines, not rebellion, but wrestling. You're using God's words and you're saying, God, but you said this. What about this? Maybe we can do this. That is the wrestling part. Go ahead, Edward.
so this is the part. That's why I said before Jacob was name was changed to Israel. So from Adam to Noah, okay, there was no Israel. Okay, so my question is, how did God deal with his creation? And what I meant by not all of the plants and stuff, I'm talking about the creation of mankind. Because before there was Israel, there was a Gentile. Abram was a Gentile in the land of Ur before he ever became the Abram, and Jacob the same. So my question goes back to, again, before Jacob was named Israel, after he had this wrestling with God, the encounter he had, how did God deal with his creation, the people of the earth, from Adam to Noah?
Are you talking about commandment wise or?
Before the commandments, because see, Adam to Noah was oral tradition based on the history of the biblical background. So I want to know, when Adam decided to rebel against God's word, God told him, of every tree of the garden, Adam, you can freely eat, except this one tree. Of this tree, if you eat of it, you will surely die, and you would know the knowledge of what is good and what is evil. There was no Israel, there was no church, there was no Jacob, there was no Abraham, there was no covenant, but God still dealt with man. My question again goes back to, from Adam to Noah, before there was Israel, before Jacob had this wrestle encounter with God, how did God deal the 3,000 years before Israel showed up, before Jacob had that wrestling encounter? How did God deal with us?
Well,
But you skipped over Moses, didn't you?
no.
Oh, wait.
No, I did not skip over.
No, Moses
Oh,
is
wait.
way
You're
after.
talking about, okay, so no, but didn't he flood the earth because he couldn't get a hold of him?
No, Moses
Nope,
was
nope.
way after. Moses was the prophet.
No, I know that.
Exactly. From Adam to Noah. Listen to the things. We got to look at the generations.
Well,
14
how he dealt.
generations.
Okay, so here let's get into this, because this is actually very interesting. Now this may go against what either historians or whatever have told you about God and the development of God, but let's get into this. When it comes to God, what historians will let you know is that people created pantheons of gods and then individualized certain gods, and then certain gods became more important than others, and anyway, it led to the idea of one God in certain cultures, and then we got to the idea that we got, not least of which was the Jewish one, and from there it worked out. It continued on to Christianity and so on and so forth. So it started with multiple gods and then developed into one. In actuality, what we think happened, and we know actually what happened because we're Jews, talking about myself and my nation, is that in reality, it was actually one God that everybody adhered to. Everybody knew that there was one God, since Adam, worshipped one God. Everybody knew that there was one God. But what happened was that people started worshiping other gods. But how would that even develop? Well, it started with one, but then people started worshiping the sun, for instance. And why? Because the sun is a servant of God. And because of that, we can ask the servant to, in our position, in our place, ask the servant favors from God. So let's talk to the servant. But then night came and the servant disappeared. Who are we going to talk to at night? Well, what we can do is set up a shrine at night and pray at the shrine, and that would signify to the servant, which would go talk to God. The children saw this, and they were not sophisticated enough to figure out that, wait a minute, they're trying to connect with the one God, but what they're doing is talking to a shrine, which was supposed to signify the sun, which is supposed to talk. Okay, so they started worshiping the shrine, and from that shrine, multiple other gods started coming out. You had the sun god, you had the moon god, you had the other kinds of god, the cloud god, whatever. And then and then behaviors starting getting gods, like the god of war, the god of thunder, the god of this, the god of that. That's how the pantheon of gods developed. So what the historians would say, there were multiple gods, then one came out. No, what we say is there was one God, then multiple, then Abraham so-called rediscovered, the one true God, and that's when everything else, every subsequent thing happened afterwards. Now, your question to how did God deal with his creatures? I mean, he saw them going into sin twice before the Jewish nation ever started to be created. The first one was at the flood, right? We all know that one. But the other one was right after the flood, when people again started to fall into sin and they started worshiping foreign idols. As we know, Abraham's father was an idol worshiper builder. He built idols, and Abraham destroyed all those idols, reaffirming that God is the one true God. So, to answer your question, that's the long answer. To answer it in short order.
No, Aaron, I even appreciate your effort. I mean, it's beautiful. It gave me some context of who you are, and I do appreciate that. So, but thank you very much for allowing me to ask those few questions. One of the things is I like the God of heaven and earth. I'm also in tune with the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and very, very appreciative to your commentary. Thank you so much for sharing that, and blessings to you, my
Yes,
friend.
absolutely.
Well, and
Happy.
Did I
Edward,
answer your question,
Edward,
though?
before you,
Did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did.
Okay.
You explained to see again. That's why I said to you, when God gave Adam, the man that He created, He gave him a direct order because God is a king. He said, of every tree of this garden you can freely eat, except this one tree. The day that Adam took the fruit from his wife and disobeyed that lawful order, that's when rebellion hit mankind. From that point on, the God of heaven and earth, the creator of all
That is what
things,
Christianity
decided.
considers to be the original sin, which in Judaism there is no
Yeah,
such thing. But yeah,
yeah,
well,
we know we go back and forth on that, and I understand. I have a lot of friends that are Jews. My wife and I've been to Israel 3 times, and I got it. I
by the way,
understand. I talked to a lot of rabbis.
let me ask you something. Have you ever read the Zohar on this? Did you ever read the Zohar's opinion on this?
Now, my friend Adam, that I have in Beverly Hills, California, him and I have gone through it back and forth, but not in its entirety. You would have to bring it back up because when we're together in his prayer room, his shawl, we go through the Zohar. Because, see, for me, the foundation of my faith has to be Judaism because that's what God instituted when He decided to call Abram from his family. He says, leave your country, leave your father, and I will make you a father of many nations. I am a child of Abraham.
Yes.
See, so that's where I go from. And that's why I said I really appreciate Aaron, because when I do speak to a lot of my Jewish brothers and counterparts, it's very good that we can have dialogue together because we pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
So let me ask you. are you Jewish? What is the situation?
I am. I'm a believer. I believe in the kingdom. Okay, because I believe that when God created Adam, He gave Adam dominion, and God is a king. He made Adam a king. That's why Israel is a nation. And when God comes back, the scriptures tells us, for us, He's going to sit on the throne of David. That's what He's doing. So all the governments of the earth will submit to the King of Kings. So for me, I personally believe that through the Israel, God is going to usher in the millennial reign through King Jesus. Okay, and I understand that my Jewish brothers and them, if you look at Isaiah, you look at 9:6, that unto us a child would be born and a son will be given. That's clearly Jesus. And if you go back and look at all the different verses of prophecy, uh, our Jewish brother Jesus the Christ fulfilled them, and that's where I stand. So I believe I'm more Jewish because I accept the Jewish Christ versus Christian accepting the Christian Christ.
Okay, I hear you. Now, I wanted to know where you're at. Okay, I get it. Yeah. So,
well, Edward, before you came in, I am biblically illiterate. I'm learning, and so I gave Aaron a simplified recap of. It seems like every time man gets too far astray, there seems to be an event where God comes down and either floods the earth, or He, goes to Abraham and makes a covenant, or He, sends His Son to teach people how to, follow the rules. And you're overcomplicating it. So that's sort of my simplified take of where we are in the Bible.
No, and I agree with you. And how I taught my children and my grandchildren, the definition for us of sin is self-inflicted nonsense.
yes.
When anytime Edward does something against the will of God or himself, he's inflicting nonsense. What sin for me is complete rebellion against a king. All of the 613 laws in Judaism and all the things we have with the commandments of the New Testament, everything is about principles. It's about statutes. It's about following God's order. So for me, as a believer, I'm a citizen of a kingdom. It's the kingdom of God. I want to operate that way. So when you say, am I rebelling against His kingdom? No, that's why He says we're in the world, but we're not of the world. Why? Because we live according to our King who's in heaven. So it makes a big difference. And that's how my wife, my children, all of us operate. We're on earth, but our government is God's government. Now, we still operate under man's government, which would be Caesar's, but if it violates any of the principles from Genesis to Revelations, we don't have to follow it according to the king.
All right. Let's go to his Pearl.
Hello, everyone. I just wanted to go back to it's funny because I can't remember like Trump does, where you can remember 50 minutes into the conversation, but there was a question that Edward asked, and I just wanted to clarify because from what I understand and from what I've studied, the Apocrypha is the Christian basis for all of this. Is that correct? Because you were talking about that earlier. One was the Catholic and one was the Apocrypha. Is that correct?
As far
That was from Aaron, right? Because I didn't use the Apocrypha.
yeah, I explained where this comes from. So yeah, I just clarified that the Apocrypha is both. I think that's just the name, but it is recognized as being part of the canon in Catholicism. I don't know about the Orthodox Christianity. I think also in Orthodox Christianity, but it is recognized as being canon in Catholicism, but not in, of course, generally speaking, and not in Protestantism. So
Correct, Aaron. And the reason why is because we know that there's other writings, like the Apocrypha, the Book of Jasher, the Book of Jubilee, the Book of Enoch. We know there's other writings. But what we look at as canon is all the scripture that talks about our Redeemer. So from Genesis to Revelation, anything that talks about being redeemed by God, those are the ones, the 66 books. There's 39 in the Old Testament, 27 in the New Testament. That gives us what we call our canon. Okay? It's not outside of the what they call the Council of Nicaea. No, that's Catholicism.
Yes.
There's church fathers all the way back from Judaism, because most believers in Christianity, what we would call Christianity, that's a term, a label, but all New Testament people were Judaism. They were Jews. They were not believers. They were Jews who believed in the Messiah. You know, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, James, Peter, they were all Jews. All 12 disciples were Jewish people. They were not Christian. And if you look at the Bible, only 3 times the word Christian is even mentioned, and 2 of the times it was derogatory, and the other time people said, oh, those are those Christians. Jesus, neither disciples ever called themselves Christians. They went according to the Old Testament festivals. They did everything. They went to the temple until Jesus passed away, which you talked about earlier too. So that's why I see it.
Yeah, right. That's largely accurate. The only and this is not to say that what you said isn't inaccurate. I'm just saying it's a large. What you said is largely accurate, except for the fact that they would be Christian, though. Since they did follow Christ, so they would be Christian. But yes, you're correct. Of course, they were Jewish, but I guess just to, if you want to classify them as being part of a religion, they would be part of Christianity. But 100%, what you're saying there is exactly, it is accurate. They were Christian. Sorry,
But Aaron, let me ask you a question, Aaron. When you think of Judaism, okay, you yourself as a Jew, do you think of Judaism as a set of laws or a lifestyle?
Set of laws and lifestyle and traditions and part of a nation, a whole bunch of things.
Perfect. So watch. Every one of the New Testament believers did not leave any of that. They followed the law. They fulfilled it. They went to festivals. They did everything. Exactly what you just said.
Yes.
And the nation of Israel was born.
What I would say is that they were Jews, part of a Christian sect. So, in other words, Christianity would be an offshoot, and this is at the time. Right now, it's not. I mean, I guess it is, but it would be considered at the time as a part of Judaism, but an offshoot thereof. So, yeah, we're on agreement.
Well, Aaron, let me ask you a question. No, we're not. Let me ask you a question.
What's the disagreement?
The disagreement is here. There was no church at the time. They went to the temple.
Correct.
That's that. So there was no church. They fellowship and they read Old Testament scripture because New Testament wasn't even around yet.
Right.
So when you say they were Christian, no, they were not. They were Jews practicing the complete fulfillment of what God was trying to do.
I'm giving them a post hoc name, because even at the time you also had the Isseim and you had the Sadducees they were Jews, right? But they also had their own name, right? They also had their own name. So this is what I'm doing right here. I'm doing the same thing. I'm giving them a post hoc name that they were Christian, but they were, of course, Jews. Just to clarify, so people understand that they are Jews. There's no way of going around this. They still upholded the oral Torah as well as the written Torah, and they were complete Jews, completely, totally, and utterly, except with the added thing that they believed in Jesus as being either God or the Messiah, or both. But and therefore I'm giving them a post hoc a name in order to distinguish them from the rest of the Jews. So we are in agreement here. I'm just giving them another clarification, or I'm distinguishing them from all of the other Jews. Is that fair?
No, it's fair. But Aaron, what I want to do is make sure that we don't label these Jews who decided to receive the Messiah who was Jewish. Remember, he never came to destroy the law. He is the fulfillment of the law for us.
I know the quote that Jesus said that I'm not here to destroy the law or get rid of the law. I'm here to fulfill it. I know. Which, by the way, this is another thing that I really love bringing up against the Jew haters who are attacking the Talmud. I'm like, which law is he talking about? Well, let's see. Well, he is arguing with the Jews on if you could help somebody on Saturday. He's arguing with Jews on helping the Samaritan, which it was a pretty unpopular to help the Samaritans. It was. And although it is fine, it is okay to save some Jew on this, save another Jew on the Saturday on Shabbos. You are allowed to do that. That's the one thing that doesn't. Again, as a Jew, I'm speaking from as a Jew. As a Jew, it doesn't really make any sense that Jesus would be having an argument with the rabbis about Saturday, because you are allowed to save another person on the Saturday, and he was healing somebody on the Saturday, which is allowed. So in that part, it doesn't really make any sense from a Jewish perspective. But nonetheless, they were arguing about Talmudic law or oral Torah. Basically, I'm using it interchangeably here. They were arguing about those things. They weren't arguing, as far as I can tell, they weren't arguing about the 39 commandments on Saturday or anything from the 5 books of Moses. They were arguing about, again, the oral law, which he said he's there to fulfill. So if you want to attack the oral law or the Talmud, then you're really going to have to answer for why would Jesus want to fulfill a satanic book, which doesn't really make any sense. But if you don't know your Christianity, then you're really going to get stomped on by me. You're really going to have to answer these questions, which they don't have an answer to. Not least of which is, and I think, Edward, I think you're going to like this. Then we'll go back to his pearl, because I think you want to say something. But let me just say this again. I see a lot of issues when you go and attack the Talmud. Not you, but general you. When somebody attacks the Talmud and they say it's satanic, they still never have an answer to how come Ruth, who was a Moabite, when we know that the Moabites could never become a Jew. The 5 books of Moses states clearly a Moabite cannot become a Jew, but yet she became a Jew. How is it possible? She gave birth to the lineage that gave birth to Jesus by the Old Testament, by the New Testament. How the hell is that going to happen? How the hell does that even make any sense? How could this even happen? That the lineage of David would stem from a Moabite that could never become a Jew. How could Jesus be the Messiah? Nobody can answer this. They don't have an answer. You know why? Because this has already been settled. But if you're going to attack the Talmud as being satanic, then you don't have an answer. The answer to that is the Talmud lays it out and says that the prohibition on Moabites becoming Jews only applied to the men, because the women, they lived in a patriarchal society. The women didn't do anything bad. It was only the men that were against the Jews, the men who did not greet the Jews appropriately. It was the men who sinned, and therefore they cannot become Jews. They've been excluded. But the women didn't do anything wrong. They didn't do. Why would they? Why should they suffer? So the Talmud comes along and makes it clear. This is why if Ruth was allowed to become a Jew, because she was a woman, and women are allowed to become Jews, even from the Moabite nation. This has been laid out by the oral Torah. This has been laid out by the Talmud. We see people nowadays attack the Talmud as being satanic. If that is the case, then I would need Christians to answer me, how could Ruth have become a Jew? And you can't use the same logic the Talmud is using, because don't forget, it's satanic. You can't use it. What is the answer to that? Christians have no answer to this, because there never was a need to answer it, because it already was settled. It was only in the modern age, not in the modern age, but it was only until Christians started condemning the Talmud that Christians became incoherent with their theology in regards to so many things, such as Ruth becoming a Jew, the circumcision, and all the other things. So let's go to his pearl. Do you want to ask anything else before I go to Walker?
Yeah, actually. Well, just a couple of comments. One was about the Christian word being in the word, but from what I read, it was disciples or followers of the way, or they were part of the way. And then there was a couple other things. Let's see here. Oh, you were talking about the Samaritan and, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you, and how it was 2 days' wages. and you were talking about the marriage covenant early on. And it's my understanding that, I'm sorry, you were talking about the 10 Commandments. It's my understanding that the 10 Commandments are basically called the ketubah, which is God's marriage contract. It's like, if you want to have a relationship with me, do these things. If you, in marriage, if you break covenant by committing adultery or fornication, or you lie, you hurt the marriage, right? You cause harm to the marriage. And that was God's extension. And it's my understanding that that's what Moses was saying. God wants to marry you. And they were like, no, this hurts my ears. We don't want to hear that. It was too loud, right? So my question, I had a couple of questions about that. Is that correct about the ketubah? And then my second question is more of a quizzical, just childlike question, and it's not any offense meaning behind it
No problem.
whatsoever.
Before you go to that, so let me first answer. Yeah, more or less. That's pretty much generally recognized as being, well understood that, it is a kind of like such a contract. I don't know if it's literal, like a literal license, a literal marriage contract, but it is recognized as being, generally speaking, it is recognized as being some kind of marriage contract. But more than that, it is a covenant. It is a bond between God and His people. So that is what is the crux of it. Likening it to a marriage contract is not bad. It doesn't contradict anything, but it's not. I'm not sure if it is literal, but it could be literal.
Okay, thank you. And then the second part of that is, and again, I do not mean this as any kind of
Do not
offensive
apologize.
thing.
Just state it.
You're in a
Okay.
safe space.
Yes.
Okay, I've been in a few that weren't. So, yeah. So my question is, okay, from what I have read, okay, in the New Testament, when they were crucifying Christ, the Romans made a sign and they put it up as a derogatory thing over Yeshua, and they put that he was King of the Jews. So back then, that was a very derogatory term. So my question is this: how did it come to be that Israeli people call themselves Jewish or Jews when that was originally, from what I understand, a derogatory term that was created by the Romans?
As far as I know, that's not a derogatory term at all. The word Jew comes from Judah, or Jew is translated in Yiddish as Yid. Yid meaning Yehidi. Yehidi or Yehudi is, as you can see in Arabic, it's pronounced Yahud. It stems from Judah. You can see this in the Old Testament, in the book of Esther. The first time this being used as Mordecai was Ish Yehidi, a Jewish man. So this is the first time it was used. It stems from Judah because the only viable tribe that still survived in the Holy Land at the time was Judah. All the other ones, as you remember, were kicked out by the Assyrians and Babylonians. So the only one was Judah. And they used to be called the Hebrews. As a matter of fact, in Russian and in Romanian, to say the word Jew, it's Ivri or Ivrei. Ivri is the Hebrew word for Hebrew. It literally means Hebrew. Ivri. So the Jews were Ivrim. Ivrim is the plural for Hebrew, for Ivri. So as far as I know, it's not a King of the Jews. It's definitely not a slur at all. But why they would consider it to be a slur is not that Jews were a slur. Definitely not. Or Yahud or let me look up the Greek and Latin versions of the word. Just give me a minute. The reason for that was they were saying, "Oh, so you're the King of the Jews. Oh, everybody look, the King of the Jews being crucified." That is why it was derogatory because they were crucifying the king of the Jews, making fun. Oh, look at him. Let's put on a fake crown made out of thorns. Hilarious. So that's why it was derogatory. Not because the word Jew was derogatory, but because making fun of somebody who's being crucified and putting a crown of thorns on his head. That is derogatory. So let me look up the word. Meanwhile, do you have any other questions?
Yeah, no, that answers that. Thank you very much. Yeah, because I understand Judah and praise, worship, So and then I think you're saying Ephraim, Ephraim. Is that what you're saying? Ephraim?
Ephraim on who?
Is that what you were saying? Ephraim?
No,
Is that what you were saying?
no. Ephraim was one of the tribes. Ivri, it's with a V sound. Ivri and Ivrim. So Ivri is the Hebrew word for Hebrew.
Aaron, while you're looking that stuff up, can we go to Walker and then we'll go to Adam?
I already have it here. So
Okay,
Jew
go for it.
is pronounced Idi Iaudios. That is the Greek. Give me a moment. Now do Latin. Sorry, Latin. Let's see if this. And there you go. And the Latin form of it is Iudi. That is spelled Iudaei. Iudi. Again, it goes back to the Hebrew pronunciation of Judah. What was the Hebrew pronunciation of Judah? Yahida. That is the pronunciation. So you can see Idios, Yudi, Yehuda, Yahud. You can see all these words stemming from Yahida. That is the original pronunciation of the word. So the Jews, this is why we are called Jews. Jew as in you, as in Yehuda. Yeah, do you understand it now?
Yes,
Perfect.
thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Okay, Walker, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Aaron and Kimberly. This is an amazing space. I love how you always put very creative and very timely and very, actually really kind spaces. No matter how they get, I've noticed that now. Basically, every time you put one on, so thank you. Also, oh yeah, well, so I guess I have maybe two questions. And they're nothing long, I wouldn't think, but I just want to get your perspective on things. The first one, so I noticed that the space is called The Story of Hanukkah, and I love that. And so I wanted to ask whether in the Talmud or the oral law or from the Zohar, what is your favorite thing that is said about Hanukkah?
Well, if I have to pick from the Talmud, the oral law wouldn't really have Hanukkah because it was given before so all of the things that you see in Hanukkah is man-made, literally. So, which by the way, I had a discussion with somebody. It was so funny, so freaking funny. He said, I said that Merry Christmas. Jesus was Jewish. I'm pretty sure that Walker, you saw the post, but some guy by the name of Goyfather responded, and it was so funny, absolutely hilarious that he said that. Well, Jesus was not Jewish. And I'm like, dude, you do realize that he celebrated Hanukkah. You do realize that, right? You do realize that his mother was Jewish. No, his mother wasn't Jewish because she didn't adhere to the Talmudic law. I'm like, in the New Testament, it says clearly that Jesus was circumcised on the 8th day. That is peculiar because Jews to this day circumcise their children on the 8th day because that is what God commanded them. Are you okay? Like, I see multiple people try to claim that Jesus was not Jewish. I'm like, can you please? Because we don't know really. Because Mary, it's never actually clear if Mary was Jewish. It's assumed. I'm like, it's a little bit more than assumed A little bit more than that. Like, they call Jesus the King of the Jews. I wonder why. They circumcised him on the 8th day. I wonder why. He was in the temple. It's like, dude, do you realize that Gentiles were not allowed in the temple? At least not in certain areas. There was one part where Gentiles were allowed, but presumably Jesus roamed the temple in all the areas, more or less, except in the Holy of Holies. But more or less, he was all everywhere. But yet, Jesus was not Jewish. Like, this is
Wait.
a retarded. This is a really retarded mission these guys are on, to try to make Jesus not to be Jewish.
Wait. Jesus did not go in the Holy of Holy?
No.
Aaron, can I help you with this?
Oh,
Yay, Mr. Philby.
Philby, all due respect, I don't need any help, but
Let
I
me
am
help you,
excited to
Aaron.
hear what you have to say. So go ahead.
Roses are red, violets are bluish. If it weren't for Christmas, we'd all be Jewish.
There we go. You see? There you go. No, but there was this one guy. So he was making these arguments, and it was so freaking funny. I like, dude, do you even hear yourself? The best part of it is, and I'll answer your question in a moment. The best part of it is that this guy I've seen constantly argue, and he made a tweet about it, and I not a quote posted, I screenshotted and sent it to him, and he didn't really have an answer. That is this you saying that the Jews run the banks, the Jews run this and that? Okay, fine, you make those arguments, but yet you want to make the argument that Jesus was not Jewish. What makes those people Jewish? If Jesus was not Jewish, then what exactly makes those people Jewish? Because they don't adhere to the oral Torah, they don't adhere to the written Torah. They are hedonistic, kind of satanic. They are hedonists. They are secular. What makes them Jewish? Doesn't have an answer, because how does Jesus not be Jewish, but they are? How does that work? It doesn't even make any freaking sense, but he doesn't have an answer. Anyway, so you're asking me about...
Aaron's favorite thing about Hanukkah is that he could go and wreck some Gentiles or some people that are Jew hating.
Jew haters. I have no problem with Gentiles, but to answer your question about which is my favorite, what is my favorite story, or what was the question again?
Basically, it was whether in the Talmud or any of maybe whatever any sincere, and I think that maybe is my favorite way to ask this question. What is your most favorite sincere thing that a Jew has said about Hanukkah, whether in the Talmud or any other good source? What's your favorite thing?
Okay. Since you're asking it that way, then I will have to stroke my own ego here and read to you a post that I posted today. And because right now, as currently as it is, this is my favorite. So
New favorite space listener.
Okay. So this is a post. If you want to go to my timeline, you'll be able to see the original post. And this is one where you see a Hanukkah menorah right next to a swastika on the other side of the road. And this is Jews who put up their menorah in defiance against the Nazi regime to show that we're not afraid. And what I said in the post is, this photo represents much more than just Jewish resistance against evil oppression or the miracle of Hanukkah. This photo also represents religious defiance and resistance against an unimaginable evil. It is the spirit of love of freedom, resistance against the leftist, Gnostic, occultist socialists. It is the defiance to bow before man, and a proclamation that there is only one God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And we are all willing to fight and die in his name. Happy Hanukkah, and may God bless you all. So since you're asking the question in such a manner, I have to say, currently as things stand, this is my favorite. But if you're going to say from a historical perspective, my favorite thing is if you want, after the space is over, you could go and listen to the start of the space and where I actually talk about the story of Hanukkah. This is all after the discussion. So what I stated is that the real and true miracle of Hanukkah is that the Jews survived, because This was not supposed to happen because the Jews were largely secularized. The Jews were passive and submissive to the Seleucid Greeks. They brought a lot of hedonistic values to the Jewish nation, and they pacified the Jews to, come on, let's just get along. And there were a lot of Misyavnim meaning Hellenized Jews, who decided to go with the flow. Let's just be friends with them. And what you had was the slaughter of those Misyavnim, those people who were traitors to their religion, traitors to God, and decided to go with the hedonistic idol worshippers. And they were slaughtered together with and they were the greater danger between the Seleucids, Greeks, and the Jews who were Hellenized. The Hellenized Jews were a greater threat to Judaism than the Hellenized Greeks, since they were the ones who were making it, seem cool and
They
okay
knew
and
better.
fine. They were the ones who said that, it's fine. You're not being really a traitor to your own religion. You're not really betraying God. It's all fine. It's all good. It's all cool. And they were slaughtered, massacred, as a matter of fact, and completely kicked out of the land of Israel. So that defiance against the Hellenized secularists, that is my favorite thing of Hanukkah, that Judaism still survives. As I stated also at the start, it is the victory of West versus East. It's always been a struggle between the West and the East. The East representing bad ideas, bad ideology, no hate towards Japan or China, just making like a general statement. The East always representing bad ideology, bad philosophy, bad religion, and the West always representing the good in mankind. Always been that. That's what it seems it'll always been. As you can constantly see it right now. This is the same thing happening nowadays. So, you have another question?
Yes, and thank you for that answer. I love hearing about many things. I mean, it's especially cool when I think about how like societies like South Korea, when they're children, they will know the they will know the Talmud, by word for word. They'll know it basically, and it's pretty good. But yeah, and my second question, and this shouldn't be very long, but just kind of one other thing that was mentioned in this space was about Ruth and Mary, and so I just a really quick maybe thought maybe Ruth the Moabitess was not under any other circumstance could never be considered a Jew, but she ended up marrying and becoming a Jew. And so my question is, because you said that you said, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that women they didn't do wrong, but the men sinned, which I mean, it makes sense because Adam sinned. But if Ruth if Ruth was allowed to become a Jew, then wouldn't it make sense that through Mary, it would be allowed by that same reasoning for the Messiah to be to come into the world the way that Jesus came in the world?
I have trouble understanding what the question is.
So yeah, basically, if Ruth was allowed to become a Jew, and then wouldn't it also be allowed that through Mary, a woman who does no wrong, right? You can't. I mean, it's not to say they couldn't sin, but that they do no wrong. But according to that logic, because the man sinned, Eve was deceived, but the man, but Adam sinned, and so couldn't, in the same way that Ruth became a Jew, could not the Messiah also come through a woman in that way?
Well, the Messiah is obviously going to have to be born. So, I mean, yeah, generally speaking, I guess so, yes, because, again, the Messiah has to be born before he can actually come, right? So,
no, I would basically the biggest thing is, did you say that the reason why it doesn't make sense why Jesus couldn't be the Messiah according to well, the Talmud or
No, he was saying that.
No, I was saying the opposite. I was saying that if you want to discredit the Talmud, then you're going to have to come up with a new answer for why Ruth could have become a Jew in the first place. And from Ruth, you have the lineage of David, which Christians claim Jesus stems from. Although there's an issue with that, since he stems from only the father. But that is a subject for a different day. The point being that if you're going to discredit the Talmud, then you're going to have to answer to the fact that Jesus, uh, how did Jesus could even become the Messiah when he's supposed to come from the lineage of David? It just doesn't make any sense. So if you discredit the Talmud, then you have to find a way around it, and Christians don't have a way around it. So it's best for Christians not to discredit the Talmud. Otherwise, you have a lot of more heavy lifting to do.
Thank you so much, Aaron.
Adam's turn.
Yes, Adam wanted to say something. Go ahead, Adam. I cannot hear a word that Adam is saying. Is he speaking?
Yeah, I don't hear him either.
Adam, if you're speaking, we're going to have to drop you off and then bring you back up.
Oh, I see his microphone, though. Try
Adam.
again.
Adam, are you there? Yeah.
Yes, hello?
There we go.
Yeah, I had to open my OBS. My apologies. I use my OBS as a leveler, EQ, filters, and all.
LFG, let's go.
Yeah, great space. Definitely enjoying the conversation and learning. To the lady before that was asking if the word Jew was a slur, maybe to a Roman or a Gnostic, somebody that's not, they probably could have used it as a slur, but when it's self-identifying with people of Judaism, that's it's not a slur. I believe I'm not certain if this is what I've heard. The word Christian was originally used as a slur. People of Jesus, following Jesus Christ's way, were considered of the way. Anybody could correct me if I'm wrong. It's just something I've heard, and kind of interesting in that regard. But yeah, great space. Definitely enjoying it, and it's what Judaism is what we all of Abrahamic religions stem from, so it's important to learn it and observe it. So yeah, definitely cool stuff. Even though I'm not, I don't personally go with any organized religions. I just believe child of God, and keep that near to my heart. And I like Jesus Christ because it was the Jews were just the Jews, and like you said, if you're a man, it's tough to get into the Judaism, right? It's a tough way. The woman easier, but Jesus gave that way to the Gentile, to the anybody else that wanted to come to God, let's say. And I really like the idea that we can be forgiven for our sins, because we're not perfect. So that's what I accept personally, but I definitely appreciate and
Christians
respect.
can be, right? Because to be Jewish, you have to live by certain rules. That's why Aaron, last time talked about how
it's tough to be a real Jew.
Exactly.
It really is tough. And then, I lived in a Hasidic, I grew up in Boca Raton, I grew up in Massachusetts, moved down to Florida at 11, and I lived in Boca Raton.
Which is Jew Central.
Yeah, that is like I lived right down the street from the Kabbalah. That was I don't know about that place, but I know Madonna went there, so I was like, I don't know.
My grandparents lived in Century Village, so yeah.
Yeah. So the neighborhood I lived in was I'd say 90% Hasidic Jews, and every week, weekend they'd be walking to the temple right down the street. There was two temples actually, but most of them went to the one on Del Prado Circle. But yeah, it's when my mother was sick and dealing with cancer, it was a Hasidic Jewish woman that would come over and help me take care of her every day. You know what I mean? And like there's no hate there toward. You'll never catch any hate, toward Jewish people from me. Different governments. Yeah, I'll criticize all governments, even our own. So but yeah, definitely. Much respect to the OGs, Aaron, and thanks for having me up. Great space.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to have you up. Bulldogs. Let's
Hi,
go.
Patrick.
Hello, everyone. Happy Hanukkah, since the story of Hanukkah is upon us. So I want to make sure I get that in there. Just want to say
Why
hi.
are you going to show me up, Patrick? I forgot to say Happy Hanukkah.
No, sir. No, sir.
I'm kidding. Okay. Much love to you. Merry Christmas and Happy Hanukkah to you, too.
Yes, as well. And Kwanzaa and any other holiday that we love and enjoy.
Hours. No. Don't do that. No Kwanzaa. No. Nobody have a happy Kwanzaa. No, that is not allowed here.
Oh, okay. Well,
if
anyway,
you're having a happy Kwanzaa,
this is
then
my
you're not
first
welcome.
time, Aaron. This is my first time, Aaron, to actually enter your as a host. I saw it under American Mission, and I was like, whoa, it's not an American Mission under the American Mission community. I'm gonna go check this out. So I applaud that you did that. And actually there is I was gonna ask a different question, but to kind of maybe keep it on. So Adam, he likes to interrupt me particularly. I don't know why, but you can't. I think he's a dog.
You do it to other people too, so it's okay. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I think it's more than me because I'm a dog and trying to pet me, and I just bark back. Anyway, so going on to this, like what Adam was saying, there was a very dear friend of mine that I met through this process of electing Donald Trump to our 47th president. And his name is Bryce Lipscomb. He was very involved with the Maha movement, and he was very entertaining, and he actually invited me to co-host with him and Miss Amarosa. And so we've been developing that friendship. My question is, or to the thing, is that, again, tagging back to Adam, is that he, amongst the whole unneeded Visa, not MasterCard. I like American Express, but they're in the Visa debate of credit cards. He was called, and I quote on December 28th, "I've been called a Jew a lot today." And he put in quotes Jew. So my question is, like, when is it how we could Bryce is a wonderful man, and maybe people know him, but from my standpoint, as a raised Catholic, but believing God and doesn't practice anything but just goodwills to people, and I do like Catholicism in terms of their prayers, but as a Christian, as a believer of God, God is real. In the mix of that type of religious to expression, which doesn't really connotate as good or bad, but kind of no one knows. My question is, like, how would you take that, or how can I like learn something today with the story of Hanukkah with that, if I see that maybe as a post, or see a friend that maybe is called that, or whatever way of life type of thing. Thank you.
So just to reiterate, so I know exactly, so make sure that I understand the question exactly as you stated it. You want to know how to learn more about Hanukkah?
I think he wants to know if he was seeing it was being used as a derogatory word, and like how to navigate that, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly.
How to address it, right?
Yes. Kim knows me very well. She we have a long past of communications and research together, and she knows how to interpret certain things I do, and I know how to interpret certain things that she does. She's more numbers and like structure. I'm more.
Well, this is what I'm thinking. It's not really your job to address any of the retards online. What you can do, if you really want to, you could always call them retards to their face and say, okay, this thing is retarded. Why? Well, you could go, if you're really that interested, then you could explain why you think it is retarded. But what you could always do is try to see what they're condemning about Judaism is in the Old Testament. If they're condemning circumcision, then you check the Old Testament. Oh, wait a minute. God ordered Abraham to be circumcised. Well, you are a retard because you are condemning circumcision. You're saying that it is mutilation of the body, but yet you're a Christian. It's supposed to be the same God. How does that really work? How the freaking hell does that really work? So that's how you know it's retarded. Let's see. What else? Oh, they're condemning Hanukkah. They're saying that Hanukkah is terrible. Okay. Jesus celebrated Hanukkah. Okay, boom. Again, retard. Like, if it is about that, then you can see, okay, first thing you got to do as a Christian, first thing you got to do is check if it is in the Old Testament. The moment you see it's in the Old Testament, that's when you know who you're dealing with. If they're attacking something that is in the Old Testament, you just say, dude, this is the Old Testament you're attacking. Like, what are you doing? If it's not in the Old Testament, let's say they're saying that Jews are bankers and all that they are in control of everything. Well, I think that is really something that you should be concerned about. Notice the thing that I'm talking about here, I'm giving you advice on is only on the aspect of Christianity, because they're attacking your religion as well, because they're being incoherent, and all that pisses off a lot of people, especially the atheists who say, oh wow, you're being incoherent, so you don't really want that. What you can do, so what you should be doing is, this is what you should be doing as a Christian to protect your own religion against such people who are trying to act incoherently. If it comes to Jews or the bankers and everything, so this is not found anywhere in the Old Testament per se. It's not something that really concerns you. So if you want, you can get involved. Personally, I don't care. So it doesn't bother me. I see a lot of those kinds of posts. Sometimes I actually engage with it. If it's not attacking Orthodox Jews, I might even agree with it. Such as, there are some Jews, such as George Soros, or some so-called Jews. They're not really Jews, but some people who stem from Jews and do a lot of terrible things. And I'm like, you know what? You're not attacking me, and we are allies on this. When it comes to this, I do hate George Soros. I do hate people like Larry Fink or so on.
Call him George Soros.
So yeah,
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah, so those people, if those posts are talking, then in a personal capacity, I would engage with it. I don't recommend anybody else engage with it, only because, you know how nowadays people go through whose posts did you like, or whose post did you respond to, and if you respond positively to such a post, then people might want to take your thing out of context and
Just
say that,
tag
oh,
Aaron in it. He'll take care of it.
Yeah, but I can do so because, first of all, I'm not afraid of being called a racist, but more than that, the good luck calling me an anti-Semite. Like, really, it doesn't really work. But I don't think it's your concern. You don't need to be concerned about some person saying that Jews are the stem of all evil and everything. You could say, if you really want to get involved and you don't know much, you could just say, you're a retard, boom, and they will, if they respond, you don't have to respond back to them. If you want to get involved, I'm saying you don't have to get involved. It's not your concern, and that's basically where I'm coming from. If you want to support Jews who are trying to defend against these people, then you can always do so. Ask them if they are interested, if they want help. But again, I don't see how if you feel that you have to take a stand. As long as they're not calling for the murder of Jews, I don't think you have to take a stand against it. There are a lot of terrible, nasty people out there. It's not your job to take care of all of them. You're never gonna end. It's never gonna end. It's impossible. I have this one guy who on Twitter Spaces actually said this. And Destiny, you guys know Destiny, right?
Yes.
Okay. So Destiny was in the space, and you saw it, Kim. You saw it. So 1984 account said that about Jews, that we used to murder these people. We used to burn them, and they weren't allowed in Jewish homes. In Christian homes. We used to burn them. Now, is he calling for the burning of Jews? Explicitly, no, but implicitly, obviously. It's obvious that he's calling for the murder of Jews. Why bring up the subject? Why even say it? Why even say that Christians used to burn Jews? Because you obviously want it to continue to happen. You obviously want it to happen. Otherwise, you wouldn't even have brought it up. But Destiny was there, didn't say anything. It's not her job to say anything. Although I have other issues. I'm not gonna bash her behind her. I'm not gonna get into it. I'm just saying it's not her job. She was in the Twitter space, not her job. You don't have. It's the same as with you. It's not your job. You don't have to get involved. If they're saying that, oh, they want to kill, okay, now that's a call to violence, and that is something that, generally speaking, if somebody's doing a call to violence, that is something that needs to be called out. If somebody is saying, but if somebody is not calling to violence, it's not your job. You don't have to get involved. If you wish, you can get involved. You can call them a retard. You can make fun of them. You can mock them. That's the best. The best way of dealing with them is mockery. That is the best way, but not your job. Seriously.
If you want to know how to handle them, just go back through Aaron's his X page, and he definitely he deals with them in quite the unique.
You can go to my replies. Yes, if you check my replies, if you check my replies, you can see a lot of funny posts.
Would memes be considered mockery, according to a new age mockery?
Memes, yes.
Yes.
Memes. Why I say memes?
I don't know, but it's so funny.
Why?
Memes.
It is. I guess
as long as you're not saying mimes,
You know what? Maybe it's a Miami thing or a Latin thing. Don't be so prejudiced about memes.
Memes.
Memes, beams, mimes, moans. He, hi, ho. Anyway, Aaron, I love the space. Thank you for that. I'm going to be conscious of what you said in terms when I see anything like that posted. I always try to away from that because I'm not very good at religion. I would love to learn more about yours. And
listen, you have a blue check mark, right?
Sir?
You have a blue check mark, right?
Right next to my American flag. Yes, sir.
Okay. That means you have grok, right?
I love grok.
Okay. What you do is you see somebody say something about attacking the Jews. What you do is try to figure out is it in the Old or New Testament? So you ask grok, this subject matter, circumcision, is it or is it not in the Old or New Testament? Grok will give you an answer. That's how you figure out, oh, okay, so this person's a retard because here we have the verse in the Bible. And that goes to everything. You see something that they're attacking Jews and you want to get involved, or if you want to know, is it true or is it not true? Okay, let me ask Grok. What does Grok have to say? Okay, here's the verse, here's the letters, here's the words. Okay, boom, figured it out. But that is if you want to get involved. I don't recommend getting involved because it's not your concern. Unless if they're calling for violence, which in generally speaking, everybody should get, regardless of whom it's being called against, you should get involved. But if it's not calling for violence, it's generally speaking not your concern if they're not talking about you. If you can't defend it, here's the thing. If you can't defend, then I would recommend don't, because a weak defense is worse than no defense at all, because then it only legitimizes their attack. Because you see, this is their defense. They will take the weakest of the defenses and say that this is the general defense. No, it's just a person who doesn't know that much.
Debating. No, but I would never do that. I mean, I'm a Catholic boy raised. Freshman year, we had to read the whole Old Testament. In sophomore year, we had to read the New Testament. It's Catholic. And St. Dominic's was my grade school, so it was always around type of religion. And as a kid, you get absorbed with that, and that's kind of what you think as a way of structuring your life from a spiritual point of view. I would never ever try to defend anything about something of grave nature in terms of the different issues that you guys are confronted about on a daily basis. I wouldn't want to say, so I would not ever say anything like that. But I would like to know is this in general, as someone who sees something, what should they say something? Like kind of that what do you call it? That saying out there, see something, say something, or see something and maybe what?
I told you don't really have to get involved if it's not calling for violence. If you see somebody calling for violence, what you can do is report their account. If it's really
no, well, not an account, just in general. Let's maybe like in the physical world, where I would, because I come across, I'm a businessman. I have Jewish friends all over. I have Catholic friends. I have Hindu friends. I got Indian friends. I got Hindu or whatever, Zumbali, call it whatever, retard friends. I got all kind of friends in terms of religious faith. I just want to know. I just want to learn here, both from the digital, which you gave your great answer, and then what would be your recommendation in the physical world? And I looked up grok, and I'm going to put it in the pill.
Well, in the physical, it will be much more complicated since certain people will get offended if you don't take their side. So let's say you have, especially when it comes to Jews, because Jews are very sensitive because Holocaust and everything. So they get very, 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 very sensitive when it comes to this. So certain Jews might take offense if you're not taking their side in the on the on the subject. They might think, oh, okay, you probably agree with them. So in the physical, I can't really give you any advice on this since it applies differently. In a personal capacity, if it is up to me, and let's say somebody is being saying something offensive, and I see them saying something offensive, I don't need anybody to come to my defense and help me out. If you choose to do so, well, it's welcome. But I'm not relying on it, right? I'm not waiting for that. I can do it myself. If you choose to do so, well, fine, fair enough. So that's me. A lot of other people, especially Jews, would want you to get involved on their behalf to show your allegiance or your alliance to them for some reason or another, because Holocaust. And if you're not agreeing with them, then you might be one of those evil, terrible people. But maybe you just don't want to get involved because for your own reasons. But that's how they're going to see it. So I can't even give you a general answer because different people are going to react differently when they see you not or getting involved. So you will have to judge based on the circumstance if it is the correct term, the correct movement to get involved or to stay quiet. So it depends on who your friends are. If your friends know, oh no, he's not gonna get involved, even he's not involved, not gonna get involved, but he's my ally, he's my friend, and it's fine, it's good, then that's one thing. But I don't know if you should rely on it. I'm not sure.
Okay. No, thank you. And I did look up Grok like he suggested. Circumcision is in New or Old Testament. It says I just wanted. It's 3 paragraphs. Isn't
Yes,
it,
I know. I know. Listen. I know exactly because I could tell you where it is found in the Old Testament. So yes, absolutely, it's found in the Old and New Testament. Both Jesus was circumcised, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, as well as all the Israelites, as well as Moses, as well as all the Jews ever since and continue on to do.
And they
So
were
to this day.
adults when they were
But
circumcised.
oh yeah, and that's the most painful, by the way. But nonetheless, they talking about the Jew haters, they would constantly say, "Okay, circumcision is so terrible." Certain Jew haters, not all of them. Some of them still understand that. Wait a minute, God commanded of them. But those who attack Judaism through that line of argument, that's when you're like, "Oh, so you're just retarded. You haven't read the 5 books of Moses. You haven't read the Old and New Testament. Clearly, that is what's going on, and clearly, what you need is a lot of help." So and I've dealt with some of them, and it's just so funny how they react once they find out, and they're like, "Well, this, that, and the other." Like, no, you lost, dude. You lost. It's over. Like your own religion disproves all of your entire theory on everything. So that's basically how
Aaron
I
is
deal
a
with it.
great weapon to have in your toolbox. Okay. And by the way,
If
Aaron,
you
I did grok.
if I get attacked, I respond 10 times
It's
in
amazing.
kind.
So I did grok you because you know how
Phenomenal.
you can grok profiles now, and it says Aaron Politodoxy is an Orthodox Jew who hosts the Politodoxy podcast, focusing on conservative voter registration and political conversion while advocating for state sovereignty and critiquing judicial reinterpretation of laws. Aaron's been celebrating Hanukkah with posts about menorahs and dreidels while also engaging in political banter, calling out Democrats, and sharing laughs. Aaron is celebrated for his engaged discussions and podcasts with Jordan Bracate and Brandon Straka, praising his work, while based Mike Lee appreciates his political insights. Dude, you get retweeted by Senator Mike Lee?
Nice.
Multiple times, yes.
Nice.
Yeah.
If you guys don't know,
you should. But by the way, any of you who's not following the senator, you should,
oh, he's
because
amazing.
he responds. No, not only because of his conservative viewpoint. No, he generally he responds to the posts. So you leave a comment, you have a 0.01% chance that he will respond specifically to your post, since a lot of people respond to it. But there's a chance he will respond. Unlike so many other representatives that don't even, they just put out a tweet and that's the end of it. They don't reply to anything. Like, what the hell is this? Like, you guys should be, there should be a law, by the way, that if you're going to post anything, then you should reply to a minimum of 3 tweets from the audience. but that's just me. But the point is that, and I'm talking about representatives, I'm not talking about everybody. I'm just talking about if you're going to represent the people, then you better, if you're going to communicate to the people, don't ignore them when they reply to you. Answer their questions. So, and you can choose. You can obviously choose, and they will always choose the easy ones. But that is beyond the problem. That is something you can't really account for. The point is that they should be replying, and the senator actually replies. He doesn't reply to all posts that he posts, but generally speaking, he does reply. So, if you want to actually communicate with him, you can do that, and there's a chance that he will reply to your post. So it definitely is worth it to have a discussion with him and to be following him. So if you're not following him, it's just a waste of time if you're not, because he will respond eventually.
Oh,
So
Could you repeat his
it's only a
name again?
matter of time.
that's
To me, by the way, to me,
based
he responds
Mike
almost
Lee.
always because he follows me. So he's
Oh, I
my
love
go-to
Base Mike Lee.
Yeah.
He's great.
Yeah. So I did Grok Bumble as well, and I see him down in the audience, and I just wanted to read out a little bit of it because it's great. It says that Bumble is a time-traveling sapio and melophile, self-appointed as Trump Doge, critiquing cultural shifts with a sharp wit. Bumble has been engaging in political commentary, predicting future events like Hunter Biden's overdose and a supernova, while also discussing Hollywood and education policy. The community appreciates Bumble's creative contributions, uh, expressing love for a gift they made. I'm surprised that there's no mention of bikini in here, Bumble. If you guys have not done that yet, it's a new feature. You can click on somebody's profile, and up in the top right-hand corner.
Wait, I have to say, although it gives you only the most recent posts, so that is a problem.
It goes back a little bit sometimes.
Yeah. Essentially,
it's a great gimmick.
With
Kimberly, you're doing a great job, and Aaron, you should definitely use it. It's a great gimmick for a show. I think it's a super kind of like.
You know what they need to do? You know what Elon needs to do? He needs to give him a voice, like so I can have a discussion.
Yes.
With him. I need it to have a voice, but that is probably.
I actually have some news.
Like I'm paying $100 for premium, and you could pay $20 for Gemini to get the voice. Why can't I have the voice here? Why the hell, Elon? Get a voice for Grok. We all want a voice for Grok. Grok needs a voice. But yeah, that it does go back. It does go back as it did with me. It's talked about. And by the way, his name is pronounced Brandon Strzok, not Straka. And I asked him, and yeah, that's what he said. It's Strzok. But anyway, it did go back to when I interviewed Brandon, but it gave you also the most recent post. So it more or less gives you the recent posts. So it really isn't the best. It really isn't the best at assessing the
But
accounts.
it's different for every person. Like you can, like if Patrick does it for you, he will get a different answer. And I find that to be fascinating. So Patrick, what's the news?
Aaron, the news. So there's two things. One, breaking news. Aaron has discovered Grok for his shows, and it's going to be so much more awesomer. Breaking news number two. Soon, I have a team here in South Florida that worked for me for the last month and a half when I started to get a little bit more serious about utilizing X to its potential. Like I love pushing the features as far as they can go until it breaks or it doesn't work or breaks, whatever. So I love that stuff. Anyone who likes that, come on over and we test things all the time. But the one I would the breaking news number two is in that research there will be very soon, or at least they're planning on. There's no timeline. There will be a 3D version of all this as a new medium in communities. And communities this past week announced, or the head engineer of X talked openly saying, yeah, there's a monetization possibility that's coming out. So, Aaron, news number three, or opportunity that I want you to tie it in with the story of Hanukkah is, what if you started a community for the voice of Grok, and you can tie it into the story of Hanukkah?
I don't know. I don't know how that will work. How would that even work?
opening up a community. Like, all right, who wants a voice for Grok? Everyone here raise their hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wow, that was the quickest raise of hands I've ever seen in my life. Everyone wants that, and you could own that, and then you can weave in and out your other stories. It's like you could then bring an American Mission, say, you know what, I want an American Mission more like a rough and tumble Dustin rough guy. No, I don't want someone else like Laura Loomer. It'll be actually kind of fascinating.
I'm thinking about it, although I'm not sure. I'm not sure how that'll tie into specifically into Hanukkah. If you want to tie it into a whole bunch of other things, that is definitely a possibility. But just
You have 10.
Thanks to Laura, but I wouldn't use the AI then. No offense.
Well, you have 10 channels, Aaron. Look at it this way, because we pushing the limits. If you
I
open,
don't want my AI yelling at me, Patrick.
all right, I'll leave it for another day. And by the way, Kimberly is having a workshop. Everyone should go to it. And so I'll be quiet and listen to the story of Hanukkah.
okay. Let's go to his pearl. Go ahead.
You guys are hilarious. I just wanted to ask if Bull was earlier referring to, because I had asked a similar question about the word Jew and being derogatory, etc. Were you possibly referring to Khazarian Jews? Because y'all brought up Saras, and could you go into
boy.
that a little bit?
Okay.
No, it was his pearl girl. Thank you for the question. Straight answer. If Aaron, you want me to post it on the pill, people can see it and they can interpret it on their own. It was just a friend of mine that I met throughout the post, or when the union of Maha and Maga met. I decided to kind of wander over to that area from a Vivek standpoint. And I met with Bryce and he invited me to co-host. We kind of had a very good rapport, and we continue to collaborate. So he's the Maha guy, I'm the Vivek guy. So if you want to put labels, that's it. But I'm a bulldog, so I'm loyal. But someone, because he was defending the whole MasterCard versus Visa or American Express, but everyone's going Visa. He was called, quote, a Jew a lot for defending Vivek and Elon, and then ultimately Donald Trump. I don't want this to become a political space. It's the story of Hanukkah. But to answer your question, that was what and so the derogatory term that Miss Kimberly correctly condensed it. How should I react if a buddy of mine, and then it led to the digital reaction that you spoke of, and then the physical world. So we're back.